Hello, and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, July 10th. We are back. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 643 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we welcome back analyst Shir Hever to talk about the immediate and long-term political, economic, and social impacts within Israel of 20 months of genocide and military failure. Later on in the program, Jon will report on the latest resistance news, including fighters in Khan Yunis destroying an Israeli tank with hand-delivered explosives and a deadly ambush in Beit Hanun, among other operations across Gaza. And Ali and Asa will report on Israel's renewed push to revive its discredited October 7th mass rapes hoax, this time with the support of the British government. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine. Israel has bombarded areas across Gaza this week, killing approximately 670 Palestinians and injuring more than 2,800 between July 2nd and July 9th, according to the Ministry of Health in Gaza. The Gaza government media office stated on Monday, July 7th, that Israel had committed 59 separate massacres in 100 hours, killing nearly 300 people, 99 of whom were targeted by the Israeli army at U.S.-Israeli so-called aid distribution points. Today, on Thursday, the health ministry reported that Israel killed at least 82 Palestinians and wounded 247 in 24 hours. Earlier on Thursday, an Israeli drone strike in Deir Balah in central Gaza killed at least 13 people, mostly children and women, when they were lining up outside a volunteer-run charity to obtain food supplements. Al Jazeera's Tarek Abu Azoum reported from the site of the massacre, saying that, quote, "Evidence of the strike is all around. This is a small but very deep hole in the ground resulting from the Israeli attack. You can see one of the shoes left by a Palestinian child, a shattered window in a nearby house. There are craters on the wall left by Israeli drone shrapnel." Reporter Moad Al-Khalut reported from Gaza City on Monday, where attacks on the city and surrounding neighborhoods have been non-stop.
The ongoing Israeli airstrikes killed many Palestinians today. The last strike targeted a group of civilians in the center of Gaza City. I'm talking to you from Al Ahli Arab Hospital. While injured people arrived to this health facility on foot and by carts, and all of these who just arrived are receiving treatment on the ground. What struck me and what shocked me the most is to see a little child while taking his last breath on the ground here. I'm talking to you while there is a helicopter is opening fire on some point here or there. I'm not sure if you can.
That was Moad Al-Khalut. On Tuesday, Israel attacked the Burej refugee camp in central Gaza, killing and wounding Palestinian families as they slept. Just before 3 a.m., Israeli airstrikes hit tent shelters, engulfing the area in flames. A survivor told Al Jazeera that, quote, "The attack felt like a ring of fire. These are school children. What is it about this school? There's nothing in it except children. It shelters only kids who have nowhere else to go. These drones are targeting nylon tents where people are simply trying to sleep. I honestly don't know why." Another displaced Palestinian who witnessed the attack said he and 10 others sleeping in a tent suddenly woke up to the sound of intense bombing and blinding lights. Quote, "The explosions were so powerful that even our blankets were completely burned," he said. "We started checking on the children and trying to make sure everyone was okay. My hands are still covered in soot as I've been trying to salvage whatever I can." On Wednesday, July 9th, Israel dropped an estimated 20 bombs on Gaza City's Tufah neighborhood, using heavy missiles that leveled buildings to the ground. A baby girl was pulled from the rubble in the aftermath of an attack also on Wednesday in central Gaza City. Mahmoud Basal, the spokesperson for the Palestinian Civil Defense, told reporters while holding the infant that, quote, the bombing was on a heavily populated house, the youngest of whom inside the building is this little girl, who is not even a few months old. Most or possibly everyone who was inside the apartment were injured or martyred. There is a woman martyr. We don't know if she was the mother of this child. In 90% of the bombings that are happening right now, it is these children who pay the price, who are targeted, killed, and injured.
الاحتلال الإسرائيلي قام باستهداف شقة سكنية في منطقة وسط مدينة غزة. الاستهداف لمنزل مأهول بالسكان بشكل كبير. أصغر من كانوا بداخل هذه البناية هذه الطفلة الصغيرة التي لا تتجاوز الأشهر الأولى. جل أو حتى كل من كان بداخل هذه الشقة قد أصيب واستشهد. نتحدث على من وصلت إلى هنا شهيدة. بقية من كانوا بداخل هذه البناية إصابات. وهناك شهيدة لا نعلم هل الأم هي والدة هذه الطفلة، لكن حقيقة المشهد صعب جدا. أكثر من 20 إصابة بهذا الاستهداف. الواقع صعب.
That was Mahmoud Basal of the Palestinian Civil Defense. And Israel is issuing consecutive forced displacement orders, mostly in Gaza City and Khan Yunis. On Tuesday, the United Nations Humanitarian Office stated that, quote, even the smaller areas where people are being forced to concentrate, now down to about 15% of the strip and shrinking, are fragmented and lack the most basic infrastructure and services. Like the rest of Gaza, they remain extremely unsafe. Across the strip, families are trying to survive this nightmare, protect their children to the extent possible, and search for whatever minimal food exists, the UN said. Since mid-March, when Israel broke the ceasefire, the Israeli military has issued 54 displacement orders, placing about 297 square kilometers under displacement, 81% of the entire Gaza Strip, the UN says. In addition to the relentless airstrikes on Gaza, more than 770 Palestinians have been killed and more than 5,100 injured over the last 6 weeks, trying to obtain meager amounts of food aid at so-called distribution sites run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, a joint Israeli-U.S. private mercenary company. This week, the GHF closed its only food distribution point in central Gaza, forcing tens of thousands of Palestinians to travel long distances toward the south of Gaza in search of food. Al Jazeera reporter Tarek Abu Azoum stated on Wednesday, July 9th, that GHF suspended operations at the central Gaza site without prior notice, adding to the danger and confusion of starving Palestinians risking their lives to access a box of food. Abu Azoum stated that, quote, the 3 aid hubs that remain operational are in the south, meaning that for hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in central Gaza, the route to get aid will be a lengthy, dangerous trip on foot. This concentration of aid in the south corresponds to what Israel is outlining under its proposal for a so-called humanitarian city amid the ruins of Rafah, which would see the transfer of Palestinians from other parts of Gaza. Palestinians are saying they fear Israel might forcibly prevent them from returning, end quote. These broad daylight plans for forced relocation of Palestinians into concentration camps in southern Gaza are part of the Israeli government's vision that Prime Minister and war crimes fugitive Benjamin Netanyahu and top Israeli officials have been pitching to the Trump administration this week in Washington. Israel's war minister Israel Katz this week stated that the so-called humanitarian city would be built, quote, on the ruins of Rafah. The aim of the area would be to, quote, concentrate the population of Gaza and separate it from Hamas, Katz stated, adding that the Israeli government is looking into the possibility of partnering with an international entity to oversee its management. Katz encouraged, quote, voluntary migration of Palestinians to other countries and said the government wants to maintain a military presence in Gaza regardless of any ceasefire agreement. A source identified as an official familiar with the matter told Tel Aviv newspaper Haaretz on Wednesday that, quote, the plan is essentially to move all civilian Gazans south to a large tent city in Rafah, where they will have hospitals and plenty of food. How did the prime minister put it? Give them Ben and Jerry's for all I care, the source said. The Israeli source said that Netanyahu is not ruling out the option of Israel running the compound set to be established in Rafah. Quote, when the construction of the city is completed and everyone or almost everyone has moved south, the question will arise as to who operates these zones, the humanitarian island, to be established in the south, the official said. The prime minister thinks that in the short term, we should not be afraid to do the job. According to Katz, Haaretz reports, the plan involves moving 600,000 Palestinians, primarily from the Al-Mawasi area, into the new zone after security screenings. Once inside, residents would not be allowed to leave. The defense minister added that if conditions permit, construction of the city would begin during the 60-day Israel-Hamas ceasefire currently under negotiation. A proposal seen by the Reuters news agency, notably bearing the name of the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, described a plan to build concentration camps called humanitarian transit areas inside and possibly outside Gaza for Palestinians. Reuters reported that the $2 billion plan, quote, created sometime after February 11th and carrying the name of the U.S.-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, was submitted to the Trump administration, according to two sources, one of whom said it was recently discussed in the White House. The plan, reviewed by Reuters, describes the camps as large-scale and voluntary places where the Palestinian population in Gaza could, quote, temporarily reside, de-radicalize, reintegrate, and prepare to relocate if they wish to do so. A slide deck seen by Reuters goes into granular detail on the humanitarian transit zones, including how they would be implemented and what they would cost. It calls for using the sprawling facilities to, quote, gain trust with the local population and to facilitate U.S. President Donald Trump's vision for Gaza. Reuters added that the U.S. State Department declined to comment on the proposal, with a senior administration official denying that anything of the sort is under consideration and claiming that, quote, no resources are being directed toward that end in any way. This week, the New York-based Center for Constitutional Rights submitted a Freedom of Information Act request for documents related to the State Department's approval of $30 million in funding for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. In its FOIA request, the major civil rights group says that it is seeking records that could reveal whether GHF was also created to further President Trump's Gaza Riviera ethnic cleansing plan. The Center for Constitutional Rights has previously joined other human rights and legal organizations in warning that individuals and entities involved in GHF could face legal liability for complicity in war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. At the same time, an investigation this week published by the Financial Times revealed that the Boston Consulting Group, quote, helped establish the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, modeled the costs of relocating Palestinians from Gaza, and entered into a multi-million-dollar contract to help launch an aid scheme for the shattered enclave. According to the investigation, the firm's team, quote, also built a financial model for the post-war reconstruction of Gaza, which included cost estimates for relocating hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from the Strip and the economic impact of such a mass displacement. One scenario estimated more than 500,000 people in Gaza would leave the enclave with relocation packages worth $9,000 per person, or around $5 billion in total. The international aid group Save the Children said it had already cut ties with the Boston Consulting Group, but this week called the firm's role in Gaza utterly unacceptable. While people are killed every day at these U.S.-staffed killing fields masquerading at so-called aid sites, and as thousands of tons of food, medicine, fuel, and supplies remain trapped on the other side of Israeli crossings, just kilometers away, Palestinian children are dying of starvation and preventable, treatable diseases in hospitals that are quickly going dark. On July 5th, Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah, head of pediatrics and maternity at the Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis, stated that fortified and specialized formula for premature or malnourished newborns is at severely low stocks. He was recorded inside the neonatal intensive care unit by journalist Bara Lafi.
Updating about neonatal ICU and the general condition in the hospital of Nasser Medical Complex. There is still shortage of milk, but there is a lot of volunteers who try to contact with us and try to help. They want to buy milk anyway from the local market and try to supply that milk for the hospital. But unfortunately, that milk is highly cost in its price, and the availability of this milk is a little amount.
That was Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah at the Nasser Medical Complex on July 5th. On Wednesday, July 9th, the hospital administration issued a warning saying that Nasser's fuel supplies had run dry and it was entering, quote, crucial and final hours. With the fuel counter nearing zero, doctors have entered the battle to save lives in a race against time, death, and darkness, the statement read. They work in operating rooms without air conditioning, the boiling heat, their faces are sweating, their bodies are weary from hunger and fatigue, but their eyes are still burning with hope and determination. Medical teams fight to the last breath. They have only their conscience and hope in those who hear the call. Save Nasser Medical Complex before it turns into a silent graveyard for patients who could have been saved. Also on July 9th, journalist Abdelkader Sabah reported from the Al-Helu hospital, where the fuel shortage because of Israel's total blockade is threatening the lives of premature newborns whose incubators need electricity to run. As 4 tiny newborns lay in one incubator, Sabah says, quote, these children require immediate and continuous oxygen, in addition to nutritional supplements such as milk and other pharmaceutical supplements, which are scarcely available in the Gaza Strip. Dr. Munir al-Bursh, the director of the Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza, stated that Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City is also facing power cuts due to the fuel shortage. He said on Tuesday, July 8th, that, quote, we repeat what we've said before. When fuel is denied to hospitals, the ventilator stops for a premature baby who suffocates in silence. A patient in intensive care suddenly loses their heartbeat and no one can save them. A wounded young man bleeds on the waiting bed while no operating room is functioning. Dr. Mohammed Abu Salmiya, the director of Al-Shifa Hospital, reported that 13 intensive care unit patients, mostly on ventilators, about 100 babies in incubators, and 350 patients relying on kidney dialysis services are currently at risk because of the severe fuel shortage. He stressed that the hospital is already overwhelmed with hundreds of injured people and will no longer be able to perform surgeries. Quote, operating rooms will shut down, and we will not be able to treat the large influx of injured people. Our oxygen stations will also stop functioning, and a hospital without oxygen is no longer a hospital, he said. Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir Balah announced on July 8th that the hospital's main generator broke down and spare parts were unavailable for its maintenance, and with the fuel shortage, hundreds of patients' lives are at risk. Meanwhile, meningitis cases are surging, especially in children, according to local healthcare workers and international aid organizations. Dr. Ahmed Al-Farah at Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis, who I mentioned a few minutes ago, reported nearly 40 cases of newly admitted viral and bacterial meningitis in the last week. Al Jazeera said that in Gaza City, the pediatrics department at Al-Rantisi Children's Hospital recorded hundreds of cases in recent weeks. Hospitals still operating are overwhelmed with beds full and severe shortages of vital antibiotics. There is no space in the hospitals, said Dr. Mohammed Abu Maghassib, the deputy medical coordinator for Doctors Without Borders in Gaza. There is no space to isolate. Airborne and life-threatening bacterial meningitis can spread in overcrowded tents, according to the WHO. Viral meningitis, though less serious, can easily spread in shelters with poor sanitation. The United Nations Humanitarian Office warned on Wednesday that, quote, in the north of Gaza, 10 water wells have stopped operating due to the shortage of fuel. Another 25 wells that are functioning only partially could also shut down soon. Shorter pumping hours, reduced water production, and limited solid waste collection provide fertile ground for diseases spreading, especially among vulnerable people, including children, older people, and pregnant women. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces shot a 14-year-old Palestinian boy in the northern city of Nablus on July 6th. The child, Iyad Abdul Muati Iyad Shalakti, succumbed to his injuries and died on July 9th, according to Defense for Children International Palestine. The group says that Iyad was with two of his friends on a hill in the Askar refugee camp when an Israeli military operation began. After their withdrawal, the military vehicles stopped at the bottom of the hill and shot around 7 bullets at the children from a distance of about 20 to 40 meters away. Iyad remained lying on the ground, bleeding for around 15 minutes, DCIP stated. When his friends tried to lift him, they were targeted again with around 20 bullets. The two children were injured, one in the right hand and the other in the foot. An ambulance arrived at the hill, took Iyad, and transported him to Rafidia Hospital, where he was admitted to the emergency room. The doctors determined he had sustained multiple bullet wounds to his right flank, right foot, and abdomen, as well as shrapnel in both hands. Israeli forces have killed 32 Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank in 2025, according to documentation collected by DCIP. 206 Palestinian children have been killed by Israeli forces and settlers in the West Bank since October 7th, 2023, the group says. The United Nations reported that Israeli forces shot and killed 2 Palestinian men on July 7th, also in the Nablus Governorate, during a raid on a house, using loudspeakers to demand the surrender of a man wanted by the Israeli army. According to eyewitnesses, the man's father-in-law opened the door and was shot. A neighbor and relative who attempted to assist the injured man was also shot and killed. According to eyewitnesses, Israeli forces then opened fire, sent a drone into the house, and forced another Palestinian to enter the home to reportedly locate the wanted Palestinian, who was later found killed outside the house. His body was withheld by Israeli forces, the UN said. Meanwhile, house demolitions continue to accelerate around the West Bank. The Wafa news agency reported on Wednesday that Israeli forces carried out large demolition campaigns in Ramallah, Jerusalem, and Nablus, destroying at least 8 homes and 2 agricultural structures. Demolitions are ongoing in Tulkarem and Nur Sham's refugee camps. Despite a recent injunction by the Israeli High Court temporarily freezing demolition orders, the UN says that Israel began destroying Palestinian homes in the 2 refugee camps on July 7th, targeting 104 residential buildings. In Nur Sham's camp, residents near the camp reported that a building was set on fire by Israeli forces within the area, the UN stated. We've published many features on the Electronic Intifada in the last week, but we wanted to highlight Heroic and Traumatized, a volunteer paramedic's story by Hind Abu Hello, writing from Gaza. Hind profiles a young paramedic who she calls Yusuf Ra'ed. He did not want to give his real name for fear that he and his family might become targets for Israel. Yusuf had been a volunteer paramedic with the Red Crescent since 2012, when he was just 14. He was one of the youngest volunteers in the history of the Red Crescent, he told Hind proudly. He and his wife and child had been displaced from Jabalia in Gaza's north, and though not on duty, Yusuf had no second thought about coming to Hind's father's rescue after Israel bombed the Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza last August. Hind's father was trapped when a stairwell he was standing on collapsed in the airstrike. Hind writes, quote, "Medical professionals and emergency responders like Yusuf have all been particularly affected over the duration of Israel's genocide in Gaza. At least 1,400 have been killed, while 360 are detained. In December 2023, while working at the Red Crescent headquarters in Jabalia, which was doubling as both a medical center and refuge for displaced people, Yusuf was detained by Israeli troops along with dozens of others, including colleagues and displaced civilians. Blindfolded and handcuffed, he was transferred to the infamous Sede Teiman detention camp, described as a torture camp by rights groups. They threatened to kill me constantly, Yusuf said. They even accused me of being a Houthi fighter. I kept pleading, I'm just a civilian, a first responder, but they didn't care. He said 4 soldiers then beat him up. Yusuf, who has chronic asthma, pleaded with the soldiers to stop. I started vomiting blood and gasping hard, Yusuf recounted, which he said only made them laugh. During one interrogation in early January, a soldier asked for his home address. Yusuf naively told the soldier. Hours later, the soldier told him, which turned out to be true, that they had bombed his house in Jabalia where his wife, toddler son, and other relatives had been sheltering until the Israeli military ordered people to evacuate the north. I broke down begging to know if my family had survived. They just laughed. We will kill everyone in Gaza, he said they told him. In another interrogation, they showed him a photo of his wife and son. If you don't give us what we want, we'll kill them, he said they told him. 1 click, that's all. He kept telling them that he was just a first responder and that he didn't have the information they were looking for, which, he said, was the location of the Israeli captives in Gaza or members of Hamas. In January 2024, Yusuf was released at Karam Abu Salam border crossing. Run, Yusuf said he was told. Run. If you stop, we'll shoot you. The first thing he did was call his brother, Abdullah, who informed Yusuf that their mother and 4 other siblings had fled to Rafah, while Yusuf's wife, son, and father remained trapped in the north. Those are excerpts from Heroic and Traumatized, a volunteer paramedic's story by Hind Abu Hello, writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. Read the rest of the story to find out how Yusuf was eventually reunited with his wife and toddler son. Finally, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and resilience across Palestine and around the world. The camp's Breakers breakdance crew in Gaza hold regular dance and art classes for kids, and this week they hosted breakdance competitions with some of their students. That was from the camp's Breakers crew in Gaza. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Thank you, Nora, and thank you for what one person in the comments accurately called a very heartbreaking update. A lot happened this week, and we're always grateful to you for bringing it all together. I rely on your report to stay informed. That's actually how I keep up with the news.
Thank you. Yeah, it's It's like triage every week. There's so much, that we couldn't put into the report, but it's just relentless. I mean, just waking up to the news this morning of mostly children and their mothers slaughtered by an Israeli drone while they were lining up to get, nutritional supplements. I don't.
The images this morning were just unbearable.
Unbearable.
Yeah.
Unbearable.
Well, we have a lot to cover today.
We
It's
do.
going to be a very rich and informative program.
Yeah.
So why don't we go ahead and bring on
let's
our
do it.
next guest? So just a reminder that you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abu Ni'mah here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. Israeli military censorship has suppressed much information about the damage caused by Iranian missiles last month to Israeli military and government sites. Iran's retaliatory strikes, estimated by Bloomberg to have caused at least $3 billion in damage, came after Israel's surprise attack on June 13th, leading to 12 days of open warfare between the two countries. A new report on the Israeli news website Wallah News revealed that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's defense ministry office is undergoing extensive refurbishment and is expected to be out of commission for months. It's located in Hakiria, the Israeli military headquarters in the heart of Tel Aviv, surrounded by malls, museums, hospitals, and schools. Much more is known about the damage to Israel's non-military infrastructure, and it was only this week that the military admitted, without providing much detail, that Iran had successfully hit military sites. How much damage, physical, economic, and political, did the war cause to Israel itself? What has been the impact on public morale, especially as Israeli military casualties have surged due to resistance operations in Gaza? And what might be some of the long and short-term implications for ending the genocide in Gaza? Joining us to talk about all this is Shir Hever. He's a researcher and analyst and the author of The Political Economy of Israel's Occupation and the Privatization of Israeli Security. He also was previously the military embargo coordinator for the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions National Movement, which celebrated its 20th anniversary this week. Shir, welcome back to the Electronic Intifada live stream.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's really good to have you back, Shir.
Thanks, Shir. So you are a close observer of what happens in Israel. And in previous live streams, you've talked about the political, economic, and demographic crises Israel faces, especially in the context of its genocide in Gaza. Just give us your overview of where things stand now, particularly in the wake of the war on Iran.
I think that a lot of people criticize me for saying that the state of Israel is on the verge of collapse, from especially economically, in the conversation that we had, I believe it was about a year ago, that I've been very premature in my predictions, and I agree that I did not expect that Israel will continue to commit genocide and to continue to exist as a functioning economy for so long, because I didn't anticipate the level of complicity from the West. I think now we are very deep in a stage that I consider the zombie stage of the Israeli economy and society. And I think that the war with Iran was a very clear indication of this, because of the way that the Israelis were talking about it and thinking about it. And I think it's very macabre as well for the Israelis, who are at this stage, no one is denying what's happening in Gaza. I mean, maybe there are some attempts, very feeble attempts in English towards international media to keep making claims that Israel is considering international law or things like this. But the Israelis are very aware this is not the case, and they admitted it as soon as as the war started, when they were saying Iran will do to Israel what Israel is doing to Iran. And I think it's a disgusting statement, because of course it's not true. Of course, it's not comparable. And it's also, I think, disgusting in the sense that the Israelis really put themselves in a situation of the victims of genocide when they're the ones who are perpetrating it. But I do think that it is an admission of guilt, because when they look at a picture of a building that was hit, and in another sense, it's also an admission of complete lack of control over their own destiny. And that's why I call it the zombie stage of the economy, because, of course, the economic crisis is terrible, and everyone who is able to leave is trying to leave, except for people who are basically committed to sacrificing themselves and their families and their children, and that's also horrible. And in this situation, it's not relevant to talk about whether the Israeli economy is going to collapse, because it has already collapsed. It's just acting with struts that are imposed by external forces that enable it to continue to exist.
Shir, let's talk a little bit more of like the granular details of the economic impact. Israel is facing a budget crisis. It had been projecting an already large deficit of about 5% of its GDP, its gross domestic product. But just in the last few days, credit rating agency Moody's says that Israel's budget shortfall is more likely to be about 8% of GDP, which works out to be about $43 billion of spending that it can't cover just for 2025 alone. And Moody's, which had previously downgraded Israel's credit rating to the lowest level ever, maintained a negative outlook in its most recent analysis following the Iran war. Give us some economic and political context for what we're seeing here, and whether this is precedented for Israel's history.
What is precedented is the complicity of organizations like Moody's or S&P. What you're describing as negative outlook is in fact sugarcoating the actual situation. And this is still an assessment by these credit ratings as if they expect Israel to ever be able to pay its debts. Maybe they say the risk has increased that Israel will not fully be able to pay its debts, but this is not the reality. The reality is that these debts have no guarantee and nothing to cover them. Last time we had this conversation, it was shortly after the budget was passed. And I remind you that the budget was passed on March 17th, one day before Israel violated the ceasefire. The only way that Israel was able to pass the budget is by saying that this is a ceasefire budget, meaning that resources will be transformed from the military to very necessary, very urgent social needs, the collapsing education system, transportation system, health system that cannot wait any longer. But as long as the military says we need more weapons, more bombs, more soldiers, the reservists cannot go back to work, then all of these things are not possible. And Israel passed the budget and then violated the ceasefire. So the budget was a sham from the beginning. Now, according to this budget, the Israeli Ministry of Defense was supposed to get a massive increase in spending. But this massive increase has already been exceeded within the first month after Israel violated the ceasefire. And that is before the war in Iran, the war with Iran, right? So really, the budget has no meaning. And any other country which would be breaking its own budget in this way and spending without any consideration to what it means and getting deeper and deeper into debt at such an alarming rate, any other country that would be doing this sort of policy would be then shut down by the international community, which has happened to Argentina in 2000 and to Greece in 2007, but it's not happening to Israel because of this complicity. But I think that the only thing that this complicity is changing is that it gives Israel more time, and more time also means more killing. So this complicity is deadly complicity, but it doesn't change the end outcome. I mean, this budget is not going to balance itself. The debt is not going to be repaid. These are things that are just physically impossible.
Yeah. And does that mean that, what's the possibility of the US and Canada and the UK filling in the gaps for Israel's spending budget? Do you see that happening? Is that just, does the settler colony just kind of get to use the West as an ATM? I mean, how will it possibly fill this deficit? And why is it important to look at this?
This is the thing that is still unprecedented, because the United States, which is willing to spend billions on weapons that it gives to Israel for free, is not willing to give money to Israel, and hasn't done that ever. In fact, there are no mechanisms for just giving money. And just imagine what would happen if the empire, the United States, would put into place a mechanism that allows the United States to cover the debt of another country. What would that mean when the global South says, well, we have some debts that were incurred because of centuries of colonialism, and it's the West's responsibility to cover those debts? So there's a good reason why these mechanisms don't exist. This is a part of colonialism heritage that we live through in our world. But there was one case in which the United States did actually try to give money to Israel. And that was in a very roundabout and creative way. During the Oslo agreements, President Clinton offered Israel, as a kind of reward for agreeing to participate in the peace process, a $10 billion loan guarantee. Loan guarantee doesn't mean that the U.S. gives Israel any money. It means that Israel will be able to take loans worth $10 billion, and those loans will be guaranteed by the United States. So in the case that Israel will default on these loans, the U.S. Will have to step in and pay the money, and this allows Israel to take the loans for a lower interest rate. So that's a benefit to Israel that potentially cost the United States nothing. But it didn't really work out, because the Israeli Knesset was not able to resist the temptation. And some of those $10 billion they decided to default upon and just force the U.S. to activate the guarantee and pay the money. And that was something that convinced the U.S. Congress never again to give Israel any loan guarantees. So, of course, what they can do is put pressure on the media, on the financial media, and on the credit rating agencies to create a false impression as if the Israeli economy has a future, and this will convince easily duped investors to put their money into Israeli bonds. And this is unfortunately also happening with municipalities in the United States that are putting the money of the residents of the city, money that is needed for infrastructure and things like this, into Israeli bonds and basically throwing it into the garbage. But that there is no magic cure, and they cannot just underwrite the debt.
Mm. And it strikes me that even if the European countries wanted to subsidize Israel, they're struggling themselves. The UK, according to the British Parliament, has given Ukraine a total of £13 billion. So that's more than $15 billion since 2022, and is having to cut its own citizens' services and basic benefits in order to pay for the war in Ukraine. So Israel and the whole West are exhausted by their endless wars. But let's focus a bit more on what's happening in Israel, Shir. And Iran seems to have successfully hit and taken out of service Haifa's oil refinery. Talk about the impact of that, and then more broadly, what do you think was learned about Israel's strengths and vulnerabilities as a result of this war? What did you see, and what's being said in Israel?
You mentioned it before in a previous interview, Ali, that Iran has an arsenal of missiles and has the ability to cause very widespread damage, physical damage in Israel. And I agree with you, but I also want to point out that the Israeli public is fully aware of this. And this is not like secret information. So the real question is, was this damage something that surprised anyone? And I think that it didn't surprise anyone. This is part of what we see in this zombie society, that Netanyahu didn't just attack Iran. He attacked Israel by starting a fight with a country that is bigger and stronger than Israel. And this was the real purpose of this attack. So I think that the damage that was caused to the Israeli economy is something that was very much taken into consideration from the beginning. So yes, of course, Israel, which is now facing an energy embargo, a growing energy embargo, the biggest coal provider to Israel, which is Colombia, stopped coal exports to Israel. The oil that is being brought in from Azerbaijan through Turkey is not a safe thing at all, because there's a lot of protest in Turkey that Turkey should not be allowing this oil to be transited to Israel through intermediary companies, and should enforce the energy embargo. So losing the biggest and most important oil refinery in Haifa is very significant, of course. And there are other things that are very significant in terms of the damage to Israeli academic institutions and research. And this is related, of course, to Israel's position or reputation as a technology center and things like this. Very important things as well. But I think of all these things, maybe the most important economic impact was on the housing sector, because the Israeli housing sector is anyway in a deep crisis. It was in a deep crisis even before the genocide started. And when Israel decided that Palestinian workers from the West Bank will not be allowed to enter Israel, then the crisis increased tenfold. And even though a lot of Israelis are leaving the country, it doesn't mean that so many apartments have become available to solve this problem. So there was a kind of financial mechanism that whereby people pay money for the right to buy an apartment in the future if they ever are able to afford it. And this weird mechanism, I don't want to get too much into the financial side of it, but it's just a way to keep housing prices up and conceal the full extent of the disaster. But what happened with the war in Iran is that India and China have both said that they recall their workers from the Israeli construction sector because they're worried about their citizens. And this is not clear whether Israel will be able to find new construction workers. And no construction workers means no housing market.
Let's talk a little bit more about the timing of Israel's strike on Iran. Israel said, of course, that it attacked Iran to destroy its nuclear facilities and missile program. The U.S., of course, underwrote that statement and those claims. It is also clear that Israel hoped that its shock and awe tactics on Tehran would quickly topple the Iranian government, a gamble that appears to have failed. Do you see other, perhaps, internal political motivations for the timing of Israel's strike?
Absolutely. I think that the attack on Iran has distracted a lot of people from, especially in the West, from what's happening in Gaza, from the genocide. We should not let ourselves be distracted. We should remember very much that this is the only story that matters for the Zionist movement, for the state of Israel. The only thing that really matters about their future is not a potential conflict with Iran. It's Palestine, and because it's a settler colony in the process of being decolonized. This is the only thing they care about. Now, the timing. This is very important because the commander of the Israeli military, Eyal Zamir, has said to the Knesset openly that he doesn't have enough soldiers, and that when some right-wing ministers, I mean the most fascist religious ministers, were saying Gaza needs to be permanently occupied, he said, well, you should disinvest yourself of these fantasies because there are not enough soldiers. And if you don't end the war in Gaza, Israel will cease to exist. These are the words of the Israeli supreme commander of the military, who was selected by this government for his loyalty, not for his military skills. So he made that statement, and that caused a lot of fear and frustration among the soldiers. And many of the soldiers are saying, we don't want to fight in a losing war, and we don't like it that we have to be in Gaza in difficult conditions for such a long time. I know this sounds disgusting, that the soldiers are complaining that it's very tiring to kill people every day. But they are complaining, and this is what the Israeli media is reporting, that it is very tiring work for the soldiers to commit genocide. So the soldiers say, we demand that the ultra-Orthodox will be recruited. And this has become a consensus among the opposition parties, which are still Zionist, and also some of the members of the coalition. And but the coalition cannot exist without the ultra-Orthodox parties within. And the ultra-Orthodox parties announced that they will call for a vote of no confidence against their own government on June 13th if a law isn't legislated that will officially exempt them from military service forever. And I have to say with a great deal of shame that I didn't realize that this is exactly when Israel is going to launch an attack, right? This was predictable. And I didn't see it, but it was there for us to see that as soon as the government was going to fall, Netanyahu will do whatever it takes. And what he did, he told the ultra-Orthodox parties, if you want to vote against this government when the state of Israel is just in the middle of a war with a country that is bigger and stronger than Israel, and Israel is in the imminent stage of destruction, and you will be called traitors, and you will be hunted in the streets like traitors. And you should see that in the Israeli media, the way that the ultra-Orthodox are referred to, increasingly with terminologies like parasites or traitors, which are very anti-Semitic and very much scary to the ultra-Orthodox community, which thinks, well, if Israel is ready to just commit genocide against Palestinians, we could be next. I don't think they could be next, but I think there's a lot of anger against them. And I think they are very much afraid. And in the end, they voted in favor of their own government at the non-confidence vote. And when a non-confidence vote fails, according to Israeli law, the government gets 6 months free hand to do what it wants. There's no way to topple the government now for 6 months. So Netanyahu got 6 months. And this is the reason for the timing. This is why this attack happened when it happened. But I want to say a little bit more about this, because I think that the manipulation has been much more clever and effective even than even just getting the ultra-Orthodox parties to change their vote. It was deeper than this. What happened is that every Israeli who is of a certain age, I can remember it very distinctly, maybe the very young do not. There was an interview in 2012 with Ehud Barak, a radio interview that was so controversial that it was then reported in all the newspapers. Everybody talked about it. Back then, Netanyahu was prime minister, of course, and Barak was his minister of defense. And Netanyahu said, we're going to attack Iran. And we're going to attack Iran even if we do it alone and the world will not support us, because Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon very soon, 13 years ago. But then Ehud Barak was in favor as the Minister of Defense. He said, we should attack Iran. And then in the interview, he was asked by the journalist, why are you in favor of this attack? And isn't it dangerous to start a war with Iran, which is so strong? And Ehud Barak said, well, don't worry. There's going to be about 500 Israelis that will be killed, and that's fine. And the journalist was horrified by this. How can you say it's fine that 500 Israelis will be killed? And Ehud Barak answered, well, if you don't like it, you can go to Finland. And so you can imagine how this interview got very scandalized and pretty much also the end of Barak's career. But this time, when Israel attacked Iran, the Israeli cabinet leaked that they had an investigation and an estimate of how many Israelis will be killed, and they estimated that the number would be 4,000. 4,000 Israelis were expected to be killed in this war with Iran, and the response in the Israeli public was silence. There were a few articles that just, reported this number with sadness, but there was no scandal. There was no... And you had the biggest critics of Netanyahu, people who are from the left, but also from, let's say, the Zionist opposition, who are not really left and are very racist, but still don't like Netanyahu because of his corruption, saying it would be a mistake, it would be foolhardy to start a war with Iran. But as soon as the war started and the missiles started falling, they changed their tune because they couldn't. They said, well, this time Netanyahu must know what he's doing. He wouldn't have done it unless he was sure that that the military objectives would be achievable. And then after 12 days, when a ceasefire was imposed, the way that it was presented to the Israeli public is that it was imposed by Trump, and Netanyahu accepted it. Then, and I think it also helped this rant by Trump when he said that he doesn't like it that the Israelis didn't immediately send the planes home and took a little bit more time to bomb a little bit more, and that was like a sign that yes, this time Netanyahu really has to accept the ceasefire. And then you saw the biggest critics of Netanyahu writing articles that said he's our amazing strategic leader and he has saved us all. So Netanyahu is always ruled by fear, but never so effectively as now. Getting the Israelis to be terrified for their lives. You know that 30,000 Israelis escaped during the war. In those 12 days, 30,000 Israelis escaped, many of them by bribing boat owners to take them to Cyprus, which is illegal because they don't even go through Israeli passport control, right? They're escaping for dear life. And after that, Netanyahu says, okay, I can self-destruct this whole country, and now I've decided not to, so you better behave. And I think we're now entered a different stage in the Israeli system of government. So it has always been an apartheid state. It has always been a settler colony. It has never been a democracy. But now the supreme leader of Israel rules like never before. So my answer to you, Ali, was the goal of this war regime change? Yes, but not in Iran.
Well, that's an interesting view that we haven't heard, which is why we love to have you on, Shir. And I mean, I'm going to combine sort of a couple of questions I have, just set some context and then give you a chance to respond. As noted, you were previously the military embargo coordinator for the BNC, the Palestinian Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions National Committee. That's, of course, an ongoing campaign. And just in recent days, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz openly announced a plan to force Palestinians into what really has to be called a concentration camp on the ruins of Rafah city in Gaza. How do these things tie together? Now, 20 months into a genocide, Israeli leaders still feel they can announce their intent to commit genocide openly, despite indictments, despite actions in the International Criminal Court, despite the International Court for Justice. They not only doing genocide, they're giving us a live commentary on their own genocide. What needs to happen to change this reality?
Yeah. Okay. Well, these are indeed a couple of questions bunched together. Let me quickly start by saying that even though I'm no longer the military embargo coordinator, I'm still a very committed BDS activist, and I'm still part of the military embargo campaign. And I'm very happy that the BNC has a new military embargo coordinator, and she's excellent. And I hope that she will also come on the show. Yeah, this is just to clarify that this point. But let's get to this idea that international law, and protest, and the BDS actions will convince the Israeli government to say, we are sorry, we made a mistake, we will now stop committing a genocide. This is not how things work. This has never been the plan of action. This is not how pressure works. The pressure is on the world. The pressure is on governments around the world to stop enabling the genocide and to take action. And this is happening. This is happening more and more. I wish it would happen sooner. I wish it would happen faster, because every day Israel is murdering civilians, murdering children, murdering people. Every day is a day too late, but it's never too late to take the right action. And we do see governments that take action there. So if you're talking about the path forward, we can talk about this, but just to address first what we're seeing now with this so-called humanitarian city. I think this is something that we see this with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Nora, you gave us a very shocking and sad, but unfortunately very real description of what is happening. This is a continuation of the same idea of dressing up the humanitarian aid, dressing up genocide as humanitarian aid. It's macabre, but it's not an Israeli invention. The Nazi Germany invited the Red Cross to visit the death camps and the concentration camps in order to observe that everything is done in a humanitarian way. And the Red Cross, you can even find those documents, gave a report about how Germany is acting humanely. But it really boils down to the genocidal intent, because the genocidal intent by Israel has been so clear from the beginning. And the attack on UNRWA was designed in order to take away the only organization that has the means to distribute humanitarian support. And after Israel attacked UNRWA so viciously, based on lies, and also by murdering their employees in Gaza, they can put in another organization that is doing exactly the opposite. So the intent is clear. I think now the difference that we see now, as opposed to 20 months ago, is that 20 months ago, when most Israelis were acting out of an emotional fervor of bloodlust and desire for revenge, the arguments that they were trying to make were that there is no genocidal intent. It's just maybe an emotion, a moment of lapsed judgment. But now I think nobody's making that claim anymore. And let me tell you about a brief interview that I've heard with the Israeli journalist Nir Chasson from 𝐓𝐡𝐞. And he was reporting about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And he was reporting about the killing of people on their way to receive food, and explaining exactly how it works. And he said, well, the soldiers are armed with deadly weapons, and they're told that they are supposed to communicate with the Palestinians by shooting at them. And he said, well, some soldiers said, well, if we're supposed to communicate that they should not go to one place, but maybe go to another, maybe give us riot gear, like non-lethal riot gear, that we can use that instead of bullets. And the officers, allegedly, I don't believe him, but this is what he said. Allegedly, the officers said, we're not giving you riot gear because this is a war. So he was describing this with a great amount of sadness and horror. I mean, and not with glee. But the journalist asked him, "Did you? So why aren't you calling it a genocide? Why are you not calling it a genocide?" And he said, "Well, for genocide, you need to have intent." And then he proceeded to prove that there is intent. He proceeded to explain how the soldiers intentionally kill, how the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and this humanitarian city are intended to cause death. And then the journalist asked him again, "Well, why are you not calling it a genocide? You know, you've just made your own point." And he said, "Because I still have to raise my children in this country." So I think this is exactly the point, that reality is in front of everyone, and they close their eyes because they don't want to see it. So this is my answer to you. What is this plan? What is it supposed to achieve? Why are they making these plans? Because they have to say something. But the intent has remained the same, which is to commit genocide. But now let me try to say something positive, because I don't want to leave it in such a dark place. Because let's acknowledge the fact that the military embargo campaign is still gaining momentum, is still making successes. The company Sidanor near Barcelona, which was selling steel to Israel, but it turned out that it's not selling steel just to any company in Israel, it's selling it to 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Systems. And steel is a dual-use item, which means that it's not always easy to enforce international law. States can always say, we don't consider it to be a dual-use item. The international law doesn't define it very clearly. We know, of course, steel is a component that you need to use to make weapons. So it's not a question. And if 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Systems is getting steel, we know what they're doing with it. But what I want to highlight that what happened with this information is that it was enough to publish the information, and immediately the company issued a statement that they will not do it anymore because they know that this is a bad idea. And when information surfaced that an arms shipment to Israel is going through an Air France flight through Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, the union in Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris issued a statement that they will not allow this to happen. So these are examples of how we're now at a stage where we don't need to start from the beginning and explain why it's illegal to trade weapons with Israel. Everyone knows it by now. It's just a question of exposing it, and which forces the Israeli companies more and more to work underground, to hide their arms shipments, to publish fake information, to lie, falsify documents. And of course, they're doing it, but there are activists who are very trained now in tracing it and exposing it. I really want to highlight the newspaper The Ditch from Ireland, which has been very, very important in exposing these documents. So many thanks to them and their commitment to support the BDS movement. And the most important thing that happened with the military embargo campaign, but not just with the military embargo, is the new UN report on the economy of occupation becomes economy of genocide, highlighting which companies are profiting from genocide. And this has been a very brave endeavor by a UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine, Francesca Albanese, to compile this tremendous amount of research. Yeah. Really, it's very important to read this report. And whoever the listeners are, viewers are from any country, you will find probably companies from your country in this report. So it's worth opening it and reading it. Yes. Mm-hmm. And of course, the report is so important and has such an important impact that immediately the United States starts with threatening Francesca Albanese with sanctions, trying to silence her, which will not work. But it's also up to us to make sure that it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Shir. Yeah, well, if we have time, we're going to say a little bit more about that report, and maybe even at some point, we hope we'll be able to get Francesca Albanese back to talk about the report and corporate complicity in this genocide. Shir, you're always so full of information and analysis, and we can never get enough time with you. So we're very grateful for the time you've given us today, and we hope to have you back soon. It's always very informative, and particularly the insights about what's happening in Israel. It's somewhat depressing, but we need to know. And on the positive side, as you've highlighted, the military embargo campaign is continuing and working, and more broadly, the boycott campaign is working. And the economic distress you describe in Israel is life-saving, because the more this settler colony is incapacitated by brain drain, by the flight of investment, by the crises it faces, then it's the end of its ability to wage genocide will approach faster, we hope. Shir, thank you again. We'll have you back soon. And again, thank you for all the work and analysis that you're doing.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much, Shir. Great to have you. It's always sobering and, dare I say, uplifting to hear from Shir and look at his very sharp analysis of how the war machine is collapsing, actually.
Yeah. It takes time. It's a zombie walking around now and doing a lot of damage, but it is a zombie. And that's the key.
Yeah. So we can't stop. We can't let up. Well, let's keep going. We have a packed show coming up after this next segment. Of course, we'll have the resistance report, but let's bring Asa on. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman, and you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. On Tuesday, a new report came out titled A Quest for Justice, October 7th and Beyond, which calls itself, quote, the most comprehensive assessment to date of the sexual violence that occurred during and after the attack on October 7th. It's published by an Israeli group called the Dina Project and partially funded by the British government. According to the Electronic Intifada's Ali Abunimah and Asa Winstanley, this is just the latest Israeli attempt to revive and repackage the discredited hoax that Hamas ordered a mass rape campaign targeting Israelis on October 7th. It's getting a lot of media hype, which is why we're taking a closer look now with Asa and Ali. But before we dive in, a heads up, we'll be discussing violent and sexually explicit content and allegations of sexual assault, so please use discretion. So Asa, from the start, media have played a central role in promoting the October 7th rape hoax. You know, we're 21 months into it, and it does not seem to have changed. Before we get into the report itself, tell us about how it has been promoted in recent days, particularly by British publications.
Yes, that's right, Nora. Because the report is partly funded by the British government, it's been getting a lot of mainstream media promotion here. The news of it first appeared in the Sunday Times, a paper with well-known ties to the British intelligence and military establishment. The headline claim, as you can see there, was that, quote, sexual violence was rife on October 7th and that there are now new witnesses. Predictably, the story was pushed online by the usual Zionist voices, but when you actually read the article, the Sunday Times article, there was nothing concrete in it backing up the claim of new witnesses. And it's also worth noting that Sunday Times piece we saw there was written by Christina Lamb, a Times journalist who's played a key role in promoting Israel's debunked mass rape hoax. Some of her earlier stories, misleading stories, remain uncorrected to this day. And again, there was nothing truly new here in her latest story. It just referred to this report that came out on Tuesday. And the opening paragraph of her article even repeats the claim that among the dead were, quote, young women stripped and tied to trees and poles, shot through their genitals. Those are details that appear to come straight from the discredited testimony of the Israeli hoaxer Rami Davidian. I know Ali will get into that shortly, but the bottom line from this Sunday Times article is this: despite the alarming headlines this past weekend, there's nothing new in the facts.
Yeah. And Ali, it seems that no matter how many times these claims get debunked, Israel or pro-Israeli organizations keep trying to revive them. Why do you think they keep coming back to this particular claim?
Yeah, I think the simple answer is they see this as the best distraction from Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. And here we are talking about it again, though obviously from a very different angle than most media. It's also one of the few narratives that lets Israel cast itself as a victim, specifically the most vulnerable kind, a rape victim. And that carries powerful emotional weight, symbolizing the most intimate and brutal kind of violation. And as we'll see, the report's bigger goal is actually to frame Palestinians collectively as having raped Israel, both literally and metaphorically.
Yeah, let's talk about that for sure. Asa, tell us a bit about the DINA project, or DINA project, I think DINA. What is it? Who's behind it? And what do we know about the role of the British government? Why is that significant here?
Yeah, in the report, the DINA project says it aims to, quote, reshape the discourse on conflict-related sexual violence, using October the 7th as a catalyst, what it calls a catalyst, to develop groundbreaking tools that will combat denialism. So a lot of jargon there. But in other words, the group is essentially alarmed that most of the world isn't buying the Israeli government's mass rape hoax. And I think they want to shut down accurate reporting about it. And so there's quite a number of details in the beginning of the report about who is behind it and this project. The report's three authors are anything but independent. So they are the following. First of all, Ruth Halpern Kadari of Bar Ilan University. And Bar Ilan University is a university very closely tied to Israel's secret police, the Shin Bet. Its engineering faculty works with the military and weapons firm 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Systems, who, of course, have been the target of campaigners. And the Bar Ilan University also helped set up a college, a so-called college in the illegal West Bank settlements. So as we'll see, Halpern Kadari herself has played a prominent role in the mass rape hoax. She's spent, if you check her full CV, she's spent decades in Israeli government roles, from clerking for the former Chief Justice of Israel's Supreme Court to advising the Prime Minister's office and holding various posts in the Foreign and Justice Ministries. And her current Bar Ilan CV, if you check it, it says she's been on an advisory committee to the Foreign Ministry for the past 6 years. So, not an independent expert by any means. The second author is Nava Ben-Or, a former judge in Israel's Jerusalem District Occupation Court and a former deputy attorney general. And the third listed author, perhaps most tellingly, is Colonel Sharon Zagagi Pinhas. Colonel Sharon Zagagi Pinhas. And she is the former chief military prosecutor in Israel's military, and she's still a high-ranking reservist in Israel's military, a reservist colonel, part of Israel's kangaroo court system of military courts, which plays a key role in enforcing the illegal occupation of the West Bank. So again, these aren't neutral experts. They're deeply embedded in Israel's system of military occupation and propaganda, And two of the authors even wrote a Haaretz article last year trying to discredit the detailed and credible testimonies from Palestinians about systematic mass rape and abuse in Israel's notorious Sde Men concentration camp that Nora mentioned in her news report in the Nakab or Negev desert.
Right. And Ali, as Asa said, media are hyping this report with the claim that there are new witnesses and new evidence to support the report's claims that Hamas ordered and organized mass rapes on October 7th as a weapon of war. You've read the report. Does it contain any new evidence, witnesses, or even victims?
The short answer is no. And as we've reported over the past 21 months now, almost, despite the flood of claims about October 7 rapes, Israel has not identified a single specific victim, living or dead. This report changes nothing. Even though it claims to be the most comprehensive compilation of evidence on sexual violence that day, it includes no first-hand testimony of any rape. The only new element is a claim of a single, what they call attempted rape at the Nova Festival. But even that comes with no detail, just a footnote claiming that a female survivor, designated only as A, gave her account to the Dina Project. There's nothing else about that. No new witnesses to that event that they can quote at any sort of length. The report also makes claims that some Israelis experienced sexual violence while in captivity, but again, the evidence is thin. It says 15 former captives experienced some form of broadly defined sexual violence, but only one suffered what it calls the most extreme form of sexual assault. They don't define that term, but it almost certainly refers to Amit Susanna, who has said publicly that she was forced to carry out an unspecified sex act by a captor. Now, Susanna's claims are cited elsewhere in the report, and she's also listed as being on the advisory board of the Dina Project, alongside Israeli propagandists Gal Gadot and Noah Tishby. The rest of the claims about former captives refer to, quote, verbal and some physical harassment. The point here is, even if all these claims are taken as true, none of it substantiates the central allegation in this report that Hamas organized, ordered, and implemented a mass rape campaign on and after October 7th. So with so little actual evidence, the authors fall back on racist Orientalist tropes of, hypersexual, violent Arab and Muslim men. They claim, for example, that some captives were threatened with forced marriage. Not that it happened, but that they were threatened. Then they write, quote, the threat of forcibly marrying the female hostages is a recurring theme. The intention to marry off female hostages, which was reported by 6 of the returned hostages, reveals a plan to engage in an act of raping and possibly impregnating them, end quote. Again, they provide no evidence of any such plan. They don't even allege that this happened. This is really just projections of their own lurid fantasies onto Palestinians.
Yeah. What about eyewitnesses? Is there anything new there, Ali?
Again, really the answer is no, but they recycle unbelievable claims from discredited sources. Overall, they claim that there are a mere 17 eyewitnesses that are known for what they describe as a large-scale coordinated campaign of mass rape across the whole of southern Israel on October 7th. You'd think that would have been witnessed by more than 17 people. But of course, although some of the what they say is vaguely worded, from a close reading, it's clear that they're referencing already well-known accounts that have already been thoroughly debunked. One key example is the story of a woman called Sapir, which comes straight from Jeffrey Gettleman's infamous Screams Without Words article in the New York Times in December 2023. Her account also appeared in Sheryl Sandberg's Screams Before Silence, the propaganda film we debunked on this live stream when it came out in April 2024. And I want to show a clip from that April live stream segment. It's a few minutes long. It's actually close to 5 minutes long, but it's important for people just to see how outlandish these claims really are. And this Sapir story and others like it are really at the center of this new report. What you'll see, first of all, is a clip from Screams Before Silence, followed by our discussion that you and I had in April 2024. And the first person you'll hear speaking is actually Ruth Halperin Kadari, the same person Asa just mentioned as the lead author of this DINA project or DINA project report. So let's go ahead and watch that.
Who stepped forward, a young woman who hid in the bushes, and described that very close to her, a few yards from her, there was a group of Hamas terrorists who pulled by the hair another woman who was stripped from the waist down.
הוא מושך לה בשיער, היה לה שיער ארוך, הוא מושך לה בשיער. היא לא לבושה, ובעצם אני מבינה שהוא אנס אותה. הוא בעצם משנע אותה. כאילו, ממש אני זוכרת את התנועה הזאת. ואז מעבירים אותה לעוד מישהו, והוא חותך לה את השד. הוא חותך לה את השד, הוא זורק את זה על הכביש, הם משחקים עם זה.
So that woman speaking in Hebrew with the blurred face is the one identified by Jeffrey Gettleman only by the first name Sapir. And for those who are listening, she describes hiding in a ditch and seeing Hamas fighters rape a woman, and then one of them cuts off her breast and tosses it on the road, and then they toss the breast around and play with it like a ball. This is a claim that has been repeated by countless media outlets over the last 6 months. The video of her speaking, and it's a longer video originally, was actually presented at a press conference by the Israeli police soon after October 7th. In the same video, Sapir claims that she saw the Hamas men beheading several women and dancing around with the detached heads. That is not mentioned in Sandberg's film because it totally discredits Sapir's account. As we pointed out in our January segment on the Gettleman piece, this could not have happened without leaving masses of physical evidence, including huge amounts of blood and DNA. And of course, where are the severed heads and the headless bodies? Gettleman was challenged about this after his original Screams Without Words article, which was published on December 28th. How could the Times have published such an extraordinary, outlandish claim without any corroboration whatsoever? The New York Times published a follow-up piece by Gettleman and his Israeli co-authors Anat Schwartz and Adam Seller on January 29th to try to repair the damage. And it contains this quite extraordinary claim. The police said they found Sapir's bag where she said she had been hiding and women's clothing near where she said the rapes occurred. And 3 severed heads were found farther away near the bodies of assailants in military fatigues, Israeli officials said without providing more detail, end quote. And I mean, that's stunning. As far as I know, of course, none of that was mentioned in the first article, which Jeffrey Gettleman claims they spent months on and interviewed 150 people. It never occurred to them to ask the Israeli police, well, do you have any evidence? But conveniently, the Israeli police said for his follow-up article after he was criticized, oh yeah, by the way, we did find the heads. But as far as I know, Jeffrey Gettleman and the New York Times are the only outlets to ever claim that the Israeli police found 3 severed heads. That has never been reported in Israeli media as far as I've been able to find. And you can imagine that this would be a huge story. You would have seen it in multiple outlets, not just in Israel, but all over the world. Gettleman just dropped it in in passing. He doesn't say if he asked the police if they have crime scene photos of these heads or women's clothes or of the alleged assailants that were found dead. There's been no claim that there is any DNA evidence. It's just a passing sentence in Gettleman's second article, and there has been no follow-up by the New York Times. Surely, if these heads existed, the story told by Sapir would have been a central part of Sandberg's film. Surely the police superintendent that we saw talking about how much evidence there is would have specifically mentioned this shocking crime and crime scene and all the evidence. Surely the women would have been identified, but instead it's just mentioned briefly near the end of the film with no mention of the severed heads.
I remember that.
Yeah, well, that was in April of 2024, more than a year ago.
Wow.
Still no severed heads.
Interesting.
Where are the severed heads that Jeffrey Gettleman told us about? So a couple of things to add here. This new report, the Dina Project report, treats Jeffrey Gettleman's reporting as credible and cites it repeatedly, but it doesn't offer any explanation about how he quoted police claiming they found these 3 severed heads. Those victims aren't mentioned anywhere in this new report. And to me, that just really shows how these hoaxers just say whatever suits them in the moment, knowing that mainstream media will amplify their lies, as we're seeing once again, without the kind of scrutiny we apply. Also, remember this. One of Gettleman's key cases was Gal Abdouche, whom the New York Times claimed was raped and murdered on October 7th. That claim was challenged by her own family and completely collapsed. That wasn't in Sandberg's film, and it's not in this report either. Yet somehow Gettleman's reporting is footnoted and cited repeatedly throughout this report as if we should treat it as credible. The case of Sapir that we just saw is one example that's cited in this new Dina Project report, promoted in the Sunday Times, promoted by the BBC and other outlets. And it's a totally fake story, as we can see. But it's representative of the so-called eyewitness accounts in this report. We've already looked closely at others in our previous live streams, like Raz Cohen and Tali Binna, when we did our debunking of Screams Before Silence. And so people can go back and watch that. I'll just say this report adds nothing new to support their stories. It just rehashes old claims. It's slightly more sophisticated the way it's presented. It's presented in a way that most media, most officials will not dig into it, will not go into the footnotes. They will just accept these repackaged lies at face value.
Ali, you mentioned some of the figures that have been revealed to have been surprise, completely discredited. Who were featured in Sheryl Sandberg's film, for example. This new report relies on some other discredited figures, does it not? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it really is an attempt to launder and relaunder all this stuff, and it leans heavily on accounts from so-called first responders, especially the group Zeka and 2 of its key figures, Simcha Greinman and Haim Mazgin. The Dina Project says they obtained information from 15 individuals, first responders, 4 members of the security forces, 4 professional first responders, and 7 civilians, either in direct conversation or through review of their publicly available oral and written accounts. They don't name the civilians, not even the ones who have given public accounts, but I suspect, based on claims they made in the report, as Asa mentioned, that one of those civilians is likely to be Rami Davidian. And you'll recall that Davidian claimed to have heroically rescued hundreds of people on October 7th. He was also a star witness in Screams Before Silence, the Sheryl Sandberg film, claiming to have seen dozens of dead victims of alleged rapes on that day, some with objects inserted into their genitals. He also conveniently said that he went around covering up and removing all the evidence so that no one else could ever see it except him. And he remains the only supposed witness to that scene he described to Sheryl Sandberg. In April, as you know, Davidian was exposed by an Israeli journalist as a total fraud who made up his stories of heroism and used his fame to score lecture tours at huge payouts. Fundraisers were done for him that raised tens of thousands of dollars. The Dina Project uses these sorts of characters to make claims about people found in positions suggestive of rape, partially naked, tied to trees, and evidence of gang rapes and genital mutilation. That's what the report claims these people are seeing. And I'll say more about that in a second. But let me talk a bit more about 𝐓𝐿. This is the same organization, and these are the same people behind some of the worst October 7th atrocity propaganda, like the totally disproven lie that a pregnant woman had her fetus cut out of her, or that children were tied together and burned alive, crimes that simply never happened. 𝐓𝐿, I'll remind you, was founded and led for decades by Yehuda Meshi Zahav. He died by suicide in 2022 after it was revealed that he had used his position to commit violent sex crimes against adults and children, male and female, for decades. Even after those horrific crimes came to light, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 remained one of his main public defenders. After October 7th, 𝐓𝐿 raised millions of dollars in donations while its leaders went on global media tours repeating lies about what they had supposedly witnessed. Last month, the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported that millions of dollars raised through 𝐓𝐿's charitable arms in the United States and France cannot be accounted for. According to Haaretz, 𝐓𝐿 raised about $14 million in the United States in 2023, but just a third of that made its way to Israel. Nobody knows where the rest of the money is. So this is a disreputable, unreliable organization led by proven liars, and none of these people are in any case trained to interpret crime scenes. They're not forensic experts, they're not pathologists. But the new report repeats many of the same old claims made by Zachas Greinman and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜. And here's a reminder of the pair. This is just a brief clip of them talking to Sheryl Sandberg in Screams Before Silence. And again, just a reminder that there are graphic descriptions in this footage. This is a clip of Simcha Greinman again and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 of 𝐓𝐿 showing photos to Sheryl Sandberg that they claim show evidence of some of the horrors they just described. Let's look at that.
Okay, I'd like to see some of what you saw.
אנחנו רואים כאן בתמונה אישה שקרעו לה את המכנסיים, ירו בה במפסעה.
As you can see, the body was brutal in different stages. This is a part of the breast.
זה אישה שירו לה כאן, זאת אישה שירו לה כאן.
Over here, and over here, and over here.
Oh my God.
So
I remember that too.
Yeah. So in November 2023, Simcha Greinman, one of the men you just saw there, stated on the record that he had not taken any photos of what he saw on October 7th. This is the Times of Israel on November 9th, 2023, speaking to Greinman weeks after October 7th about one particular atrocity scene he claimed to have seen. Quote, asked if he had pictures from the scene, Greinman said, I don't have one picture in my phone. It's enough to suffer for the rest of my life from what I saw. Some emergency workers, he acknowledged, did photograph other crime scenes and sent pictures directly to official authorities, end quote. That's from the Time of Israel. So it's very clear Greinman himself did not take any photos. So what exactly was he showing Sandberg? The Dina Project cites Greinman's testimony from an interview published in a 2024 book called Testimonies Without Boundaries, written by Alon Penzel, a former Israeli military spokesperson. It's a collection of interviews with Zaka volunteers. I find it's odd they have these titles: Screams Without Silence.
They love the without device.
Screaming Before Something. Testimonies Without,
Yeah.
But
So
I
creative.
actually spent $8.99 on this book. And here's a bit of what Penzel writes about his interview with 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, about what Grindman supposedly witnessed in Kibbutz Be'eri. And this is a quote from the book. Alon Penzel is writing in the first person. He says, 𝐓𝐶 continued his testimony and shook me even more. In this building, they found 30 more bodies, most of them women, and all of them were naked. It was inevitable for me to interrupt and ask, that is, there is no choice but to conclude that there was rape here, maybe even group rape. This time, 𝐓𝐶 had no doubt. Definitely, when you see these things, there is no doubt about them. There was rape here. End quote. So Grindman is claiming that he found 30 naked people in a room who had been raped, and yet Israel still cannot identify a single victim or come up with any forensic evidence. And of course, this claim, and many others like it that Grindman and Otmazgin and others from Zaka made, are not mentioned in the Dina Project report. In fact, the report does not even mention Kibbutz Be'eri as one of the sites where it claims mass sexual violence took place. So it seems that story from Grindman, one of his many sick fantasies, was too outlandish even for the Dina Project to reproduce.
Yeah, and I'm reminded that Kibbutz Be'eri themselves, actually, after the New York Times article, their spokespeople denied that they denied that any sexual assault or rape had occurred there.
Ali, what about photos, videos, and alleged testimony from others in this new so-called report?
Yeah, I mean, it would be easy just to dismiss all of it and say it's a repetition, but because media are going around saying, oh, there's new witnesses, new evidence, we have to get down into the weeds. And the Dina Project report asserts that, quote, a large body of digital materials, mostly visuals, recorded the atrocities of the October 7 attack as they occurred in real time, end quote. It claims that some of these materials portray sexual humiliation and assault, but they do not claim there are any photos or videos of a rape occurring. And that's actually consistent with earlier UN reports that examined thousands of photos and videos and could find nothing substantiating rape in any of them. Just to remind you, this is what the report published in March 2024 by Pramila Patten, the UN Secretary General's Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, states about key claims that are recycled throughout the Dina Project report. This is paragraph 65 of the UN report, which actually rejects a number of the prominent Israeli atrocity claims about October 7th. In the last sentence, it says, quote, allegations of objects found inserted in female genital organs also could not be verified by the mission team due in large part to the limited availability and low quality of imagery, end quote. And then here's paragraph 47 of the same report, which addresses claims about the positions in which bodies were allegedly observed. Again, these are all claims that the Dina report relies on heavily. And so the UN report points to, quote, erroneous interpretations of the state of bodies by some volunteer first responders without relevant qualifications and expertise. Some examples include mistaking post-mortem pugilistic posturing, a boxer-like body posture with flexed elbows, clenched fists, spread legs, and flexed knees due to burn damage as indicative of sexual violence, misinterpreting anal dilation due to post-mortem changes as indicative of anal penetration, and mischaracterizing grazing gunshot wounds to genitalia as targeted genital mutilation using knives, end quote. Another person the Dina Project cites as a credible source is Shari Mendez, a military reservist who was stationed at the Shura military base, which was being used as a makeshift morgue on October 7th. Although she has no qualifications to make such judgments, she has claimed that she saw signs of rape on many bodies. I should point out that the Dina Project is actually full of praise for the Pramila Patten report. So this same report that debunks their claims, they think it's a great report. I think that should be noted for the record. I want to go back to one more clip from our April 2024 segment, debunking the Screams Before Silence film, which talks about the military base and features the same Shari Mendez.
Shura base, which is where all the victims of the October 7th massacre were brought. There were body bags lining the corridors from the floor to the ceiling on both sides. And we never knew what we would see. We never knew what the level of the atrocity would be inside the body bag. As we did more and more of what we were tasked to do, we realized that women not just murdered, women were shot in the head so many times that it seemed like there was an intention, an objective to obliterate their faces. Most often families couldn't be shown the faces of their daughters. And we began to see that some of it was sexual in nature, directly targeted sexual violence. Some came in with no clothing and mostly very bloody underwear.
Did this feel systematic to you?
Yes, it did seem systematic to use sexual violence as a weapon of war.
So now let's go back to that April 18th article in Haaretz, and here's what it says, quote, "At the Shura base, to which most of the bodies were taken for purposes of identification, there were 5 forensic pathologists at work. In that capacity, they also examined bodies that arrived completely or partially naked in order to examine the possibility of rape. According to a source knowledgeable about the details, there were no signs on any of those bodies attesting to sexual relations having taken place or of mutilation of genitalia," end quote. The article also says that there were police forensic teams at the Shura base, and then it says, quote, "These teams did not document a single case of sexual assault or cases of genital mutilation," end quote. And let's also go back to the UN report, which says that the UN team examined thousands of photos and video clips provided by the Israelis. The UN report says, quote, "In the medico-legal assessment of available photos and videos, no tangible indications of rape could be identified."
Asa, how does the report deal with this lack of evidence? Do they just deny it? Are they trying to sweep it under the rug? Hope that, these mainstream media outlets just, what we used to call rip and read. They just take the headline and don't do any actual reading of any report that would debunk the headline itself. What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Nora, this is crucial. It's so important that the fact that the lack of evidence, because you still get responses. It's important not to just say, I think, that, oh, we have to, we can just ignore this. No, I think we do have to get into the weeds and debunk it, because it is still believed, it is still pushed by the mainstream media. You see, I mean, I was posting about it online on Twitter earlier in the week and trying to do some of the initial debunking, and you get responses from some people who say things like, "Oh well, Hamas, filmed it all. They filmed it all, and they live streamed it." It's completely untrue. It's important to emphasize there is no visual or forensic evidence of any of this. And for these propagandists and for the people who say that, people like Piers Morgan will regularly on his show say things like that. and actually he relies on Christina Lamb, quite often the Times journalist we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But for people like that, the core problem remains: no matter what claims they make, they still haven't identified a single victim, living or dead, of the alleged the supposed mass rapes on October 7th. So instead, what they do is they move the goalposts in this report by inventing a new legal framework that lets them hold Palestinians collectively responsible for crimes with no proven victims or evidence. And so they argue that individual Palestinians should, quote, bear responsibility for the full range of atrocities committed as part of that assault, even if they did not personally commit each specific act. Jesus. I mean, this is what they were saying about an innovative framework, right? Even if they did not commit each specific act or were not aware of its commission by a co-perpetrator. And they also suggest transitioning from a victim-centered evidentiary model to a broader approach that accounts for the systematic silencing of victims. I think that's just jargon to paper over the fact that they're claiming, they're claiming a vast organized rape campaign happened. It's jargon to paper over the fact that although they're claiming a vast organized rape campaign happened, but nearly 2 years later, they still have no actual victims. And to compensate for this fact, they propose lowering legal standards, like allowing hearsay in trials of Palestinians.
Right. Ali, what do you think the bigger agenda is here? Talk about the timing. And also just like, I know there's so many of us who are reading actual UN reports with actual evidence, with actual forensic analysis and testimonies and eyewitnesses, video evidence of Israeli soldiers raping Palestinians in their torture camps. And that is given absolutely no airtime. There are no special commissions. There are no, special groups that are fundraising, it's complete gaslighting. So what is the bigger agenda here? What's the timing of this new resurgence of these hoaxes? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, as I said, this is one of the few narratives that lets Israel portray itself as a victim, even while it is carrying out this genocide in Gaza. But this storyline goes even further. It demonizes Palestinians and justifies their extermination, I think, in the eyes of Israel and its supporters. And that intent is almost explicit in the Dina Project report's language. For example, it claims the alleged October 7th mass rapes, for which there's no evidence, were, quote, motivated by an extreme ideology based on explicit genocidal intent and fundamentally driven by a complete and utter dehumanization of the Jewish people, end quote. And, we just heard Shir Hever talking about how Israel, while committing a genocide, wants to appear as the victim of a genocide. And that's exactly what we see written into this report, which also says that, quote, Hamas inculcated its operatives with deeply anti-Semitic doctrines, and these directly influenced the nature of the crimes committed during the attack. It also claims that, quote, it stands to reason that indoctrination to demonize Jews and Israelis facilitated the removal of any moral restraints. Again, we're talking about imaginary crimes that this report is dealing with, crimes for which they have no evidence. And this is about reframing Palestinian resistance to decades of Israeli murder, dispossession, occupation. It's about reframing resistance to that as a continuation of the Holocaust. The message is clear. Faced with such absolute Palestinian evil, anything Israel does can now be justified. But in reality, it's Israel that has genocidal intent and is committing genocide against Palestinians. And as so often, Israel projects its own horrific actions and motives onto its victims.
Oh, finally, Asa, the name of this organization, the Dina Project, is itself very revealing. Tell us more about that and what you know.
Yeah, that's right, Nora. The name Dina Project is a reference to a horrific story in the Hebrew Bible, which is, of course, known to Christians as the Old Testament. In Genesis chapter 34, Dinah is the daughter of the patriarch Jacob, who's also known, a character is also known as Israel, which is where the word comes from. And entering the land of Canaan in Arabic, entering the land of Canaan, which is, and of course is an ancient name for Palestine, Jacob and his tribe come to Shechem, or modern day Nablus, and there Dinah, his daughter, is raped by the son of a local prince. Jacob's sons at first allow the rapist to marry their sister, but they change their mind because he had defiled Dinah. That's the quote from the Bible. So what they do, Jacob's sons, is they massacre every man and boy in Shechem, and they take every woman and girl into slavery. Quote, they plundered the city, they took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and in the field. If that all sounds very much like what Israel is doing in Gaza now, it's no coincidence. Israeli soldiers are often motivated by genocidal hatred and by religious extremism. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in October 2023 made explicit reference to another Bible passage that calls for, quote, blotting out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. People will remember that, of course, the reference to Amalek. Amalek is said in the Hebrew Bible to have been another Canaanite tribe. And even those who claim to be secular, those Israelis who claim to be secular, like the authors of this report, knowingly chose to name their project after a genocidal Bible story. So it's clear that they see the non-existent mass rape survivors from the Nova Rave as the modern day Dinas, and the Palestinians in Gaza as the modern day Canaanites or Amalek. And they're trying to redefine international law, as Ali outlined, so that the Palestinians can en masse be punished for a crime that didn't even happen. Israel's so-called feminists are treating the mass rape hoax as a warrant for genocide. The goal is the eradication of Gaza in the same way that Genesis 34, chapter 34, says that the people of Shechem were wiped out.
It is bottomless. And I hope that this is the last time we have to debunk these disgusting claims. But of course, that's not how Israel and its supporters
it won't
work.
be.
This is their only thing. Yeah,
it won't be, and we'll keep doing it because this video will be out there. We'll of course cut this as a separate segment, and it will be out there. It will be a tool for people to see how this disgusting propaganda works, and hopefully to show people how to take it apart themselves and what questions to ask. And we'll keep doing it because this is genocidal blood libel. It is genocidal atrocity propaganda, and we have to do this to rob this genocide of any shred of support or justification it can claim to have.
Well, thanks, both of you. It is a great sacrifice that you make on behalf of all of us to go through these just depraved, hoax-riddled reports. And Ali, that you had to spend $9 on that disgusting book as well. Thank you for doing that. I'm sorry you had to do it. I'm sorry we all have to keep listening to these genociders trying to project onto Palestinians what they are literally doing to Palestinians right now over the last 21 months and over the last 80 years. Thank you both. Let's bring on Jon. Moving right along. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Disgusting indeed.
Yeah. 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 It's just endless and heinous. Ugh. But here we are. And, you know, this is the work that we do. We debunk, we provide facts, we provide evidence, we provide analysis, and we provide a report like the resistance report that no one else is doing in the English language. So there was a lot that happened this week, John.
Yes. June was the deadliest month for the Israelis, and this past week of July was worse. So It's trending in the wrong direction for the Israelis. Of course, as you always point out at the beginning of the show, it's also trending down for Palestinian civilians who are the target of this war. Yeah. But we will show you the resistance fighting this week, as we do every week.
All right. We'll take it away. Thanks, John.
All right. All right, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 643 of Israel's genocidal war. I am reporting this on July 10th, 2025, and this is day 557 of the ground war in Gaza. Israeli troops on the ground in Gaza for 557 days. The Palestinian resistance with no supply lines, no ability to have a hinterland to retreat to, like the guerrillas in the mountains, in the jungles. The Palestinian resistance has still standing in the same places that they were on the first day of this war fighting, and we are going to see that throughout this next 25 minutes or so. And like always, everything that I'm showing you this week on the show happened between now and the last time that you saw me do this report. So let's begin with the maps, as we always do. We've been showing these United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs maps that show increasing shoot-to-kill zones in Gaza. You can see there on the map that we are now up to 85% of Gaza shoot-to-kill zone. You can see the 3 ghettos that Israel is attempting to set up. And the goal is to push people down into Rafah, which will become, according to the Israeli plan, another ghetto, a smaller ghetto inside the Gaza ghetto. But of course, as we know, tracking this war day by day through the whole thing, Israel's plans are often and continually thwarted by the resistance. But just want to make a quick note on ceasefire talks, because there's a lot of that going on and a lot of people ask about it. The principles that Hamas has stood by since the beginning of this war remain in place. End the war, withdraw from Gaza, open the crossings, and exchange prisoners. That are the same conditions for Hamas, for Qassam, for all of the resistance factions that speak in a unified voice on this topic. The latest addition to those principles, of course, is not just open the crossings, but for aid to be distributed through the original mechanisms of the United Nations, not through this murderous private mercenary company that's killing hundreds of Palestinians trying to get aid. So, and on the Israeli side, Netanyahu, same. He won't end the war. He won't allow the war to end because he has not achieved his 4 objectives, which we repeat on this show all the time to show the failure of this war. His objective number 1, return the captives through violence. That has failed. There's still 20 soldiers in Gaza to be exchanged. Destroy the Qassam brigades. You're going to watch again on this program that is not the case, quite the contrary. Destroy the government. We've seen the municipal government across Gaza reestablish itself when it was attempted to be destroyed. And that number 4, Gaza is no longer a threat to Israel. We know that is also not going to be achieved. So 0 for 4 for Bibi's objectives. And it's just worth noting because this is a crucial point. The idea of the aid mechanism returning to the United Nations is a critical point of Palestinian sovereignty. What we're seeing with this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is appalling, and this cannot be the future for Palestinians. And at this point in the negotiations, Hamas cannot relent on that point. So if people want to follow it day by day, back and forth, the promises by the American president, keep those notes in mind, because they remain consistent week after week. And now looking at this map here, you can see all of the areas that are no-go zones, that are shoot-to-kill zones. But if we flip to map number 2 here, the Israeli military has released this map this week that shows actually the land that they control. And you can see on the bottom left there, the 36th Division is along the Morag corridor there. That is the piece of land that they separate Khan Yunis and Rafah with to create this Rafah ghetto. And the blue areas are just the extensions of the buffer zones. And you can see in Khan Yunis that they're not controlling Khan Yunis. They're not controlling along the middle camps. They're attempting to widen the buffer zone in eastern Gaza City in the north there. And then the area that is shown in blue in the bottom right corner in the northeast side of Gaza is Beit Hanun. And we're going to talk about Beit Hanun because that map makes it look like Israel has control of Beit Hanun. But there was an operation this week that killed 5 soldiers and wounded 14 others in that area. It's clear that the Israelis do not have control over that territory, but we will get to that in a bit, because we're going to start in Khan Yunis and take a look at the Khan Yunis map that we show here. There are 6 Qassam battalions in Khan Yunis plus 1 Special Forces battalion. You have to presume that there's a significant Rafah brigade presence in Khan Yunis, since the cleansing of Rafah doesn't require the full Rafah brigade to be there. So 6 battalions in the Khan Yunis brigade, 1 Special Forces Nukba battalion. And this week, Khan Yunis carried out 30 operations against Israeli military vehicles alone. That goes with 160 operations since this the expansion of this war began in late April, effectively early May. We are going to turn to the first operation this week. This is a hand-delivered Shawad EFP. We're watching the fighters here moving. I've broken this video up into pieces to show you a little bit better what is happening, but you are seeing fighters under fire here in Khan Yunis, carrying out this 3-part operation where they're going to literally hand deliver the Shawad's EFP, which we have seen throughout the war. You can see the fighters mouse-holing, moving through the rubble here, moving across destroyed houses. This is their neighborhood. They know how to move through these areas. We've watched that now for 600 days, 500 plus days of ground war. And this is the fighters. They're cheering on this. They're spotting. You can see the mark of a tank there that they're spotting. We're going to have 3 cameramen on this operation, plus the fighter with the Shawaz. We also have a Yassin Archers team that is with them that are going to follow up. And the fighters are here right on top of the Israeli position. You can see the berms. Again, this is a theme. The berms that were created in the battle last year that are now overgrown, that the Israeli military is using as an attempt to cover. The fighters here are cheering them on. They say the fighters, that the Israelis burn houses, demolish houses. They kill children and civilians. By God, it's vengeance for our blood, our women, our honor, and our dignity, O Lord. And the other fighters are talking about identifying the tanks, and there's 2 tanks and 2 APCs. Are we frozen here on this video? Okay, so that's the setup for this operation. Here comes the Shawad fighter. The other cameraman, you can see the triangle there. That is the mark of a tank. The fighter's holding the Shawad in his hand. He's going to navigate through the rubble here. We're going to see it from 3 different cameras. They're cheering him on, telling him to go, go, go. The hero went, the one fighter says. It's a commando operation with a Shawad. They're cheering him on. You can see him running there. He's blurred out like always in these videos. There you can see him again moving towards the tree, the date palm there, and he's going to climb over the berm here. Now we're going to show it from another angle as he goes over the berm. So we've got 3 cameras here that we're seeing. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 showing us that this is camera number 1, but he has just placed the shawad behind the tank. Now he comes back over the hill, over the berm, and you can see the tank detonate. You can see the massive cook-off from the blowout panels that that the tank has to attempt to save the crew inside from the ammunition that is being detonated. And these blowout panels are not magic. We saw them being used. We saw them on October 7th a number of times, and the crew inside were all killed on those operations. Again, we're seeing this multiple times from multiple angles. If you look at that middle camera, you can see him running back. He returns to his base safely in this operation. And the Israelis claimed 1 dead and 3 seriously wounded in that operation. We'll just watch this one more time. The fighters here with the Shawaz navigating through the destruction. And again, the berms that the Israelis created in the first battle of Khan Yunis, which happened from December till April 2024, now are 14 months overgrown. There's actually as we saw last week on the operation with the Shawaz dropped inside the Puma armored personnel carrier, that there's growth in these berms, and that's what you're seeing. You see him advance there on the right to climb over the berm. The tank clearly doesn't see him at all. He places it, climbs over the berm, places it, and then climbs back to the berm, returns to his base safely. Pretty remarkable operation. We keep saying each week these operations are the kind of operations that can turn the war, because the Israelis watched this operation. A lot of it's censored in Israel, but this one, they talked about this one on the news, and the fact that they had this 3 camera angles. The preparation of this operation really upset the Israelis because they continually lie and say that they have some sort of control over these areas. Which they clearly do not. We're also still seeing Shawaz devices. We're still seeing appropriate weapons being used. And this is only one part of this operation. Like I said, there's multiple stages to this. We're going to see this triptych again in the next shot, because the fact that the 3, we can skip to that next shot now, number 6. To just show that again. If you watch the middle frame, you can see the fighter emerging back safely, back to his base safely. And number 7 is when we crack right into, after this operation, the fighters move immediately with a Yasin strike that hits the Namr that's behind. At the beginning, we saw the commander of the operation point out that there was 2 sets of tanks and troop carriers, and the Israelis admitted that that second Yasin strike there killed and wounded soldiers in that second tank. The fighters here come back, and he's saying, "Oh Lord, make us firm. Come on, guys." And he says, "Come on, give me your head. Let me kiss it." And you can literally hear him kiss his head in that video. Maybe tomorrow I can throw it up. I have the audio track and the uncensored on my X, and you can see him kissing. There you see the soldier emerging from the tank, the second tank, to see what's going on, and he's immediately hit by the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighter that we were watching on camera 2. That soldier was also wounded. The Israeli report from Army Radio describes that company commander who was in the second tank was injured by shrapnel and was taken to the hospital. And they admit, Army Radio, that in the preliminary investigation of the incident indicates that the fighters emerged from the alley towards the tank. The tank crew identified the fighters behind him, but not immediately. And after the explosion occurred, the crew could not find him anymore. He returned to his base safely, and here's where the fighter says, "Kiss him. Can I kiss you on the head for that operation?" And when you hear the original audio track, which I think is worth going and listening to, you can hear the way the fighters are communicating all through that operation. So a remarkable operation. Again, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, understanding where to be, understanding what weapons to use, all the appropriate weapons still being used. They're devastating shawat that are built by them. Let's go to number 8 here, because this is the day earlier. This is 3 Yasin strikes against Namr troop carriers, again using the rubble, the devastated terrain, as the Israeli military planners call it, to move through their own villages, which they know, even though that's disorienting to them because the buildings have all been destroyed. A lot of people in Gaza talk about how you don't know where you are. You lose your bearings because all of the buildings that you used to use as landmarks are gone. This is one of 6 Yasin operations this week versus Namr troop carriers, and those troop carriers carry an entire infantry squad in the back of them, so they can be deadly operations, many wounded. But of course, Israel has been covering up, especially their wounded. They've been covering up of late. We know that June was the deadliest month for their soldiers, but they didn't give us a wounded count to tell us how many more were wounded. And I still think the death counts they don't seem to add up to these to what we're watching there. Only 1 soldier killed inside that tank that destroyed and is in flames. It just seems some of these things hard to believe. 8 more Yasin operations versus tanks and D9s this week. And there was 15 IEDs also this week versus tanks and troop carriers in Khan Yunis. Here's a Shir al-Quds tunnel operation still in Khan Yunis, also against a troop carrier. You see the fighters emerging out of the tunnel here. The tunnels are still the principal tool that the fighters have. They don't have mountains, they don't have a supply line, but they do have unexploded Israeli bombs, and they do have a remarkable tunnel network that runs through all of the Gaza Strip and is what has facilitated these actions. You can see this is a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐜, explosively formed penetrator. The fighters are going to disguise it, and there you see them setting up a camera in the rubble. The stones have eyes. Hezbollah used to say that as well back in Lebanon. During the occupation days in Lebanon. And that's what we're seeing in the rubble in Gaza, is that they're setting up these cameras that can't be seen in the rubble and capture these operations. And you can see now the fighters are going to detonate in the tunnel from the safety of the tunnel. So when they detonate and the tank explodes here, they're going to call in the Israelis are going to call in heavy fire all over the area of this operation. But because the fighters are in the tunnel, they're protected from that, and they live to fight another day. And we haven't seen in all of this war, 643 days, we have not seen a single suicide operation or even a suicidal operation of so much risk. The fighters are returning to their base safely, and that is also part of why they're able to continue these fights. And I just want to report on another operation in Khan Yunis that we do not have video for yet, but we are going to apparently get video for it tonight. I will break it down next week on the show, but in Abasan al-Kabira in East Khan Yunis, according to the Qassam field report, we targeted the field report says we targeted a Merkava tank and 2 Zionist personnel carriers with Al-Yasin 105 shells. Al-Qassam fighters also targeted 2 military excavators with Yasin 105s. After that, our fighters advanced towards the enemy soldiers and engaged them with light weapons and tried to capture one of the soldiers. But field conditions did not allow it, so they eliminated the soldier and seized his weapon. The fighters observed the landing of aircraft. The Israeli military admitted on Wednesday night that an excavator driver was killed. And on the IDF's field report, it says that an Israeli soldier was killed and nearly abducted in the southern Gaza Strip earlier today. The military announces the name of the slain soldier was not released. The IDF says that he will be named later. According to the probe, several Qassam gunmen emerged from a tunnel and attacked Israeli forces in Khan Yunis. During the attack, the operatives attempted to abduct the slain soldier who was operating an excavator. The IDF says the soldier struggled with the Palestinians and he was shot and killed. Israelis say Israeli forces guarding the area opened fire on the operatives to prevent the abduction attempt. So that reads like a Hannibal, but we will see what the video shows when it is released, if and when it is released. Word just before we got on air was that we are going to see that video tonight. So that is Khan Yunis. Again, the main thrust of the battle right now for the Israelis. They're trying to turn Khan Yunis into Rafah, and they are failing spectacularly in that objective. But let's take a look now at Gaza City and northern Gaza, because there's operations there this week as well. Gaza City, you can see Shujaiya on the east of Gaza City, and Tufa, which is just outside of the old city of Gaza, old Gaza City. Jabalia camp is north of Jabalia. It's not on the map there, but it's an extension of Jabalia, and it's north between Beit Hanun, and in the upper left on the northwest edge is Beit Lahia, but Beit Hanun is the area that the Israelis showed you on that previous map that they believe they had full control over, but we will get to that operation in due time, because we're going to start with Shujaiya. If we look at this next picture, you can see what the Israelis have done to Shujaiya. They have not defeated the resistance, but they have certainly destroyed the eastern half of Shujaiya. This is aerial photography from Haaretz from late June. So it's even worse now because they've been shelling and airstriking the area in preparation for their troops to go in. In number 12 now we're on, we can see a Saraya al-Quds multi-stage ambush that takes place in Shujaiya. You can see the 6 IEDs there of various types. Saraya al-Quds uses a lot more improvised explosive devices. They're adapting to the fact that their manufacturing is a different set of manufacturing than Qassam, and you're seeing them be adaptive and using return to sender operations where they rewire Israeli weapons and return them. There we saw them using propane tanks with explosives. We see them use barrel bombs with explosives. So this is the operation begins with 6 IEDs detonated against Israeli military vehicles. We're seeing it here from multiple angles. The Israelis said 2 killed and 8 wounded in this operation. This is a special forces versus special forces operation. This is Saraya's special forces against the Israeli military special forces in this operation. The fighter says here, whoever desires to take our weapons, we will take his soul. And the point of that is I think something that needs to be said. You can see the fighters are now using this tunnel to access to get position on the Israeli military where the people that were hit would retreat to. So we see the tunnels being used in Shujaiya. The tunnels began in Shujaiya for the resistance tunnels. The first tunnels were in Shujaiya to hide Qassam fighters in the early days of the armed struggle in the 1980s. And this is where the fighter says, if they desire to take our weapons, we'll take their soul. And this is another point, because you'll see it in the ceasefire talks that the Israelis proposed disarming Gaza. That is not even worth talking about. Even if they say that it was the commanders said to the fighters, we're disarming. The fighters of Qassam and Saraya al-Quds would not listen to their commanders. Their commanders would not say that, but the fight is not something that you can take away. This is a national liberation struggle. No commander would take their weapons away, and if they did, they would be not listened to, and they would be replaced. So there's the thermobaric warhead that is fired at the Israeli position that killed 2 more in that operation. You can see the Israelis fleeing from that operation. And you can see them in their buildings here. These are 𝐓𝐡𝐞 units, and Saraya is going to use rocket artillery here, 107 millimeter rocket artillery, and they're going to fire it at that troop position. So using artillery rockets fired instead of on a trajectory, firing straight at the Israeli position, which is adapting with a shortage of weapons, presumably, although it's a very effective weapon to use. And that was the thermobaric warhead that you see here. The Shir Hever are saying there's 20 soldiers holed up in that building that they are targeting. And they made a point of also here with small arms firing on the soldiers who are attempting to leave. So 2 killed, 8 wounded at least in this operation. They're showing you the burning from the thermobaric warhead, which creates a fuel air explosion and would create that fire. So, and again, the telltale sign, the medevac helicopter dropping flares here. And they say to be continued because there will be more from the resistance in Shujaiya, as we see in this next video, number 13. This is multiple EFPs set by Shir Hever. The fighter here says, don't talk to us about their army, about their drones, about their fighter jets. It's all nothing. God is with us, is what he says as he's planting these EFPs, 2 EFPs that are going to be simultaneously detonated versus army vehicles that you can see here from the triangles dropping in here in the upper corner. You can see they're detonated. We watch them plant a pressure plate. So essentially when the vehicle drives over it, it puts enough weight on it, triggers the spark that lights the fuse and detonates the explosive. So you don't need to have fighters right there to detonate them, which is also safer. And we see Shir Hever using these often. You can see pieces flying off the tank there that they're showing you in those red circles. So this is still in Shujaiya, still this week, another tandem EFP operation against tanks. And there was 10 IED operations in Shujaiya alone this week. This next one is a close quarters battle in Shujaiya between the Qassam brigades and Israeli special forces. This also came along in a video that has 2 sniper operations that I'm not going to show because they don't show the sniper, and we can't show Israeli soldiers being hit. So, and they were hit. So you can check out again on my X feed, which is simply an archive of these resistance operations. That's all that's on there. So you can see it there. So that was another soldier killed in that operation. And then this is in Tufa, just outside the old city of Gaza, part of the old city of Gaza. And this is a Zalzal 4. Essentially, it's called an earthquake. It's an EFP that Shir Hever has adapted and improved throughout the war here. You're seeing them burying it here. And we see them, like I said, using more of these adaptations. When we see Qassam, we're seeing them using all still appropriate weaponry. You can see the tank there that's going to go detonate this, as you can see there from the second camera. The tank rolls over, trips the pressure plate, and detonates the explosives. And these explosives are created, like some of them are barrel bombs, where you just fill up, you harvest the unexploded Israeli bomb, you put it into a barrel, you bury it, you set it with a pressure plate detonator, and you have a serious bomb. This one is an EFP, which is even worse because it sends the projectile dart, which penetrates the armor of the tank. Another Qassam operation in Tufa here. This is from July the 8th. You're going to see fighter thread the needle here with his Yasin 105 to hit a Merkava tank. That's can't see him because he's hidden in the destruction of the Israeli attack. These number of operations, these Yasin operations in Gaza City this week numbered more than 6. So we're talking about daily operations, even though the troops are only on the eastern edge of Tufa and Shujaiya. We have one more operation by Shir Hever in the Jabalia camp. We're moving further north with each of these operations out of Gaza City now, and a bit further north there you can see how they're using the propane tank. You can fill the propane tank up with American and Israeli bomb explosives and then bury it. You're going to get a good shot here of how they set the pressure plate on this one. And this is an interesting footage because they also managed to capture Israeli footage, CCTV footage that they had up of their operation. And you're going to see at the end of this the footage from the Israeli side, which we don't see that all that often, but this captured footage. So you can see how he's trying to set the pressure plate and bury it. He wants it to be the same size as the hole so that it sits right on top of the device and wires to the device, and then they bury it in. So they fill it in here and then they move out of the way. And because they've been surveilling the area, they know that the D9 armored bulldozers are going to destroy everything in their path. So you can see here the D9 destroying tents that have been evacuated, and the D9 drives right over that explosive that was set. If the D9s weren't wantonly destroying tents after people have left them because they have evacuated, they wouldn't have tripped that one. This next one is a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 mixtape. They threw it together a mixtape, and we remember all of these operations. Some of them I'm showing you on the show today. These are Stones of David operations, but remember the one in Beit Hanun that you're going to see coming up here, where they flipped the Jeep here. We remember that when the war resumed. This operation in Beit Hanun was executed. So the Beit Hanun battalion is still very much in play. Sniper operations that had to be edited. Again, you can find the unedited on my X feed for that. There was the tunnel operation. Here comes the Shawad into the cabin of the troop carrier that we broke down last week. If you didn't see that, go check out last week's show. And one more thing from Beit Hanun. We got leaked video here. This is thermal imaging of a night operation on Monday night local. This is a still footage of an ambush that killed 5 Israeli soldiers at least and 14 wounded and caused total chaos. We can't show the full video on this program, but you can see from the still that it's chaos. And I just want to point out that this is the place, Beit Hanun, is the place where the war started. At the end of October 2023, when the Israeli military went in, they went into Beit Hanun first. In about a month later, it was the first place the Israeli military told us they had operational control over, and we scoffed at that at the time, and it's been proven to be ridiculous every time they say it since then, which has been roughly half a dozen times for Beit Hanun. They've been invaded repeatedly throughout the war. Its battalion commander, Hassan Fayyad Abu Hamza, was said to be assassinated by the Israelis on May 24th, 2024. Israel celebrated it, that they had killed the commander of the Beit Hanun battalion that had caused so many fatalities of Israeli troops. The ceasefire happened in January, and we saw, people will remember, footage of Abu Hamza walking around in Beit Hanun without a security entourage. He doesn't need any protection from the people. It's the opposite. We saw Abu Hamza, who's supposed to be dead, walking with a couple other people and greeting families that had come back to Beit Hanun, greeting them and giving them condolences for their losses that had occurred during that stage up to that point in the war, which is, of course, pretty embarrassing for the Israelis because they had already made one of their little kill sheets for him and said how successful a raid it was by their Yahalom tunnel unit, that they had killed him in a tunnel. That was totally false. And we'll also remember that that ceasefire that we're talking about came about on the heels of a couple dozen serious operations in Beit Hanun that foiled the general's plan. The general's plan, which was to ethnically cleanse all of northern Gaza, that plan went to die in Beit Hanun. And the final operation before Israel said, okay, we'll accept the ceasefire, was the one where we saw the Merkava tank had its turret blown off, tossed meters away from the hull of the tank, which was flipped upside down. and a pretty spectacular show of defeating the Merkava tank that Israel has so much pride behind. The ambush that happened on Monday night, the Israeli military talked about it. They had sent two brigades in, and because they had bombed it so heavily before going in with artillery and airstrikes that they believed that there was nobody there, forgetting, of course, that there's a massive tunnel network underneath Beit Hanun that continually kills Israeli troops. But nevertheless, the Netze Yehuda battalion went in, the 1st Ultra-Orthodox Battalion in the IDF, went in on foot, and that's what we're seeing here. 2 IEDs detonated simultaneously on the foot patrol, killing at least 5 and wounding 14, causing a chaotic scene. The IDF said that the area was significantly attacked from the air in the weeks before the operation to soften it up, and that the 2 explosive devices were detonated precisely as the force passed through. The initial assessment said that that device had been prepared in the previous 24 hours. So the fighters in Beit Hanun are all over the Israeli military's movements. The first movement into Beit Hanun after the January ceasefire, and you have this operation that Israeli media was calling one of the worst operations since October 7th. Abu Ubaidah, who we note has been speaking a number of times before field reports. We haven't got the Beit Hanun Battalion field report operating from the tunnels as they are, but Abu Ubaidah said the other day that the complex Beit Hanun operation is an additional blow delivered by our mighty fighters to the prestige of the frail Israeli occupation army and its most criminal units in the field that the occupation thought was safe after it had left no stone unturned. He's referring to the bombing campaigns. The battle of attrition that our fighters are waging with the enemy from the north of the Gaza Strip to the south will inflict additional losses every day. And it has recently succeeded in miraculously freeing its soldiers from hell. If it may fail to do so later, and additional prisoners will fall into our hands. Abu Ubaidah suggesting they are going to attempt to capture more soldiers for the ones that they have right now in Gaza. The steadfastness of our people, Abu Ubaidah said, and the bravery of their courageous resistance fighters are exclusively what forge equations and shape the features of the next phase of this war. The most foolish decision Netanyahu can make can be to keep his forces inside the Gaza Strip. So that is Abu Ubaidah speaking on the Beit Hanun ambush. We will maybe see footage of that in the coming week. Although, like I said, it was at night, and night operations, we don't generally see those on film, but we do have that thermal imaging, and I can do my best to try to make that to YouTube standards for next week's show if there is not another video. So that is the resistance report for day 643 of Israel's genocidal war in Gaza.
Thank you so much, Jon. I mean, just that operation in Beit Hanun, can you just give us kind of more of an overview of the brigade? You said there was an ultra-Orthodox brigade. Does that mean they were part of these kind of new calls by the Israeli government to bring in, ultra-Orthodox religious reservists who haven't fought in a long time? They're barely trained. They
want to expand that. They want to expand those battalions. The Netze Yehuda battalion was set up, I believe, in the late 90s, the last days of the 90s. It has fighters in it from the Hilltop Youth. They spent a lot of time in the West Bank, which is why essentially they were set up to operate in the West Bank, which is why they were the unit that had sanctions put on them for the murdering of American citizens, and they wreaked havoc in the West Bank, and that was pointed out by Qassam fighters too, and they pointed out the number of times that they've hammered the Netze Yehuda battalion. And so essentially Israelis believed that they had a clear path to have these soldiers walk in. And as they were walking in, they were hit by 2 roadside bombs, anti-personnel devices, and then fighters emerged from the tunnels with small arms and RPGs and fired on the tanks, the bulldozers, the reinforcements, and created a scene of total chaos. And all we have is leaked Israeli thermal imaging that I had in that still image. But you can watch that video and clearly see that the Israelis do not have the upper hand in that ambush at all. They are dragging each other through the mud, dragging their casualties through the mud. And that operation really was something that was talked about widely within Israel because of the chaos of it and the fact that it was at night, the number of helicopters. There was a blackout on it, but there was a lot of leaked material during that blackout, including that as many as 5 hospitals had to be used, which was what made people believe that the casualty tally was even higher, because to use 5 separate hospitals, including as far away as Jerusalem, indicates a large number.
Yeah. And, in terms of using the tunnel network, I'm always impressed by how fighters in these, separate battalions, these Palestinian fighters are able to still use the tunnel network, are able to still develop more of the tunnels, and the Israeli military can't even begin to penetrate the network.
No, I mean, they've said many times that they've destroyed the tunnels in Beit Hanun. They said it many, many times. They've destroyed the tunnels. They have clearly not come even close, because the fighters are able to move. The Israelis have encircled Beit Hanun. So the fighters are in theory trapped in Beit Hanun. But the tunnels keep them safe, because the Israelis are not fighting in tunnels. They have not fought in tunnels in many, many months. The fighting in tunnels by the Israelis was a very brief period of time, and they don't do that. And these operations that we saw, remember back before the ceasefire, there was a whole series of operations in Beit Hanun. All of them used tunnels. All of them used cameras above ground. A number of them used high explosives from unexploded ordnance that made extreme explosions that we hadn't seen before on that scale. And so Beit Hanun is just remarkable. And their commander, Abu Hamza, is just created a military legend by being told he was dead and assassinated, and then emerging. The fighters are popular. People could say what they want about the government. The fighters are popular in Gaza. They're heroes. And a commander of a battalion during a genocide doesn't need security to walk around Beit Hanun. The people all come out and greet him. He's just a normal person walking amongst his own people, and everybody thinks that he's a hero for fighting. So he's created a legendary status, promising to punish the Israelis every time they come back to Beit Hanun, and he's lived up to his word on that.
Indeed. Incredible. So there's just a couple of things that we want to discuss. Ali, Shir mentioned Francesca Albanese's report for the UN, detailing the economic ties to Israel's genocide in Gaza, naming, I believe it was more than 40 companies that are profiting and have deep ties with Israel's killing machine. What can we say about the report? And the West's response to it, which has been, of course, very predictable.
Yeah, well, why don't we start then with this very brief clip of Francesca Albanese introducing the report at the UN Human Rights Council earlier this week, and then I'll say a bit more.
Of this system that entangles many more. What I exposed is not a list, it is a system, and it is to be addressed. Now, my expectation is that the 𝐄𝐥𝐶HR database, the Working Group on Business and Human Rights, and lawyers, investigative journalists, and prosecutors globally will take this framework and secure that what states have failed to achieve, accountability. And we must reverse the tide. As I conclude, let me say, member states must impose a full arms embargo on Israel, suspend all trade agreements and investment relations, and enforce accountability, ensuring that corporate entities face legal consequences for their involvement in serious violations of international.
Yeah, as you said, Nora, her report names 40 companies, but what she stresses is that it's not about those individual companies. Of course, she does want them held accountable, but it's about a whole economic and financial system that sustains occupation, apartheid, and genocide. But among the familiar names of companies that are included in the report are Microsoft, Alphabet, the parent company of Google, and others, some of which we've discussed on this live stream. She also names Caterpillar and Hyundai, which both supply heavy engineering equipment to Israel, which is used in the operations that John showed us in Gaza, those Caterpillar D9 bulldozers, but also Hyundai equipment is used in home demolitions across the West Bank. She mentions logistics giant Maersk, the shipping company that we currently have a story on the Electronic Intifada about how it's involved in specifically in helping ship parts for the F-35 fighter bombers that Israel is using in this genocide. And travel sites that are familiar to any of us, like Booking.com and Airbnb, as well as energy companies, including BP and Chevron. And so it's a call for accountability. Her report is very meticulous. Perhaps we'll have a chance in a future show to talk in more detail about it. But the reaction from the United States was very swift. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, posted this yesterday on Twitter. He posted, "Today I'm imposing sanctions on UN Human Rights Council Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese for her illegitimate and shameful efforts to prompt the International Criminal Court take action against US and Israeli officials, companies, and executives." And he says that Albanese's campaign of political and economic warfare against the United States and Israel will no longer be tolerated. We will always stand by our partners in their right to self-defense. And so, it's a topsy-turvy world where the United States and Israel, who are committing genocide, are the victims of warfare by Francesca Albanese. But I also think that the fact that they're resorting to sanctions, which will have no effect on her personally, it blocks whatever assets she has in the United States. She probably, I don't know, but I'm assuming she doesn't have very much exposure. It's a sign of desperation. It's a sign that the US and Israel are totally isolated. They're still very powerful, don't get me wrong, but they don't really have any tools they've lost control of the narrative completely. And so this just an empty gesture from Rubio.
Yeah. I was looking through the report last week, and it really is a great, very detailed, meticulous, as you said, resource for activists who are involved in the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign, because it lays out in very plain, accessible detail how these companies are profiting, who they are politically and financially tied to, and which kind of war crimes specifically they are committing throughout the genocide and in terms of the continued settler, colonial project in the occupied West Bank. And it's extremely useful. So if people haven't read it yet, it's Francesca Albanese's UN report. It's called From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide, and you can find it online. But yeah, hopefully we'll get Francesca back on the live stream so that she can talk about it in detail. Well, I think that's a wrap for today. Did we have anything else we wanted to talk about? There's so much always, but yeah, we're almost
I
at
think
the
we've
3-hour
given
mark.
people a lot to go with. There's always more, and we'll be
Always
back
more.
next week. So
That's right. That's right. Well, let's take a quick tour of the website. I wanted to highlight our colleague Maureen Claire Murphy's Palestine in Pictures photo essay that she does every month.
And it's really, I mean, the thing Maureen always does emphasize is this is really presenting and supporting the work of Palestinian photographers on the ground, not just in Gaza. These are pictures from all over Palestine, but especially in Gaza, where these photographers are doing extraordinary work, documenting this genocide while also trying to survive it. And I actually think some of the photos we probably shouldn't show on this YouTube channel, because although nothing is sort of gratuitous, some of them are still quite graphic. So I urge people to go to the Electronic Intifada and look at Month in Pictures. And Maureen also does this incredible in-depth roundup and analysis of events over the previous month. So it's a little bit like your newscast, Nora, but for the month, and it's tying together sort of big picture elements here that are hard to keep track of every day. It's along with your news report, I find Maureen's text here to be the two things that keep me best informed, because I can't follow everything. I'm like everyone else. I'm following so much. And the extraordinary amount of work you put into that news report and that Maureen puts into this monthly analysis, along with these extraordinary pictures, I think it's one of the most valuable things we offer. So I really want to encourage people to look at it and share it.
Yes, absolutely. And that's under the features section at the Electronic Intifada's website. We also have incredibly valuable analysis from our other colleagues. David Cronin and Michael Brown have new pieces up. Space Agency heads to Venus with help from genocide profiteer. There's Dave with the best headlines in the biz.
This feature that is really remarkable. I mean, there's so much. We've just published a new piece from Asim and Nabi in Gaza City. It was actually published today, I think, while we were on air, because it wasn't online when I looked at the site earlier. So I haven't even read it yet, but Asim's writing is always incredible and searing. And the headline there is trying to imagine living in a genocide. But try to imagine living in a genocide, rather. But what I wanted to also highlight is this piece by, I think it's at the top of the features section, Tamara, there, from Guatemala to Gaza, genocide denial thwarts justice. And this is an extraordinary piece that goes back in depth into Israel's role in the genocide of 200,000 Maya and other indigenous people in Guatemala in the early 1980s. Israel was the principal arms supplier, provided training to the death squads of the Guatemalan regime of General Efrain Rios Montt, and that has left an enormous legacy. And so this piece, which speaks to people in Guatemala who are still working for justice and working to find out what happened to their loved ones who had disappeared in that genocide, is extraordinarily important to see the global connections between settler colonialism, militarism, Zionism, and Christian Zionism, because it is the sort of the strong Christian Zionist evangelical presence in Guatemala to this day, which is why its regime is so strongly allied with and supportive of Israel. I just realized, I'm not sure if 𝐓𝐡𝐞 piece it was literally just published, so sometimes it takes a few minutes for it to show up. There's a cache that clears, so I'm not sure if 𝐓𝐡𝐞 piece appeared yet, but it will appear on the website probably by the time we sign off.
That's great.
And maybe we'll talk about it more next week.
Yeah, that would be great. And again, check out electronicintifada.net, subscribe to our email list, get notified when we have new live streams and podcasts coming up on the YouTube channel. I want to thank Tamara Nassar, as always, for directing and producing this program, to Eli Gerzon for social media production, to Maureen Claire Murphy, Michael F. Brown, fact-checking, everyone at the Electronic Intifada, Pierre Loisel for condensing these broadcasts into 1-hour chunks that are distributed on radio programs across the U.S. and Canada. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you to everyone. Did you want to thank some...
I want to do more thanks.
We
can't thank people enough, especially to you, our viewers, our listeners, our readers, and our supporters. You make all this work possible. Everything you see, from the incredible reportage of our friends and colleagues in Gaza who are still working, still reaching the world 21 months into a genocide, to all to the beautiful, incredible Month in Pictures feature that we see, that we just talked about, to everything on this live stream, that in-depth deep dive into the new rape hoax report that Asa and I spent many hours on reading into that forensically, all the time that Nora spends putting together the news report and the other journalism she's doing, of course, the meticulous analysis that Jon Elmer does, everything we do, all the articles we publish, all the material we produce on this YouTube channel and other channels is thanks to you. And I'm just going to name a few of the people who have supported us recently: Stephanie, Conrad, Sayed, Amal, Esther, Samir, Kerry, Max, John, Stuart, Eric, Dina, Jean-Paul, Howard, and Bernard. That's just a few of you. There are so many more who, each and every one of you, is helping us to get the word out, to get the truth out. And as I always say, everything we do will always be available for free to everyone. We will never ask someone to pay to watch a video or to pay to read an article. Our mission as a non-profit independent media organization is to make this information available to the whole world, to get the truth out. And we can only do that thanks to you, to those of you who have the means to support it, so that everyone, including those who don't have the means, can read it, access it, and share it. That's the way we work. It's a solidarity model. So thank you all for your love and solidarity. We can't do it without you.
Well said. Thank you so much, Ali. And on behalf of all of us at the Electronic Intifada live stream, Tamara, John, Ali, Asa, myself, thank you. And we will see you next week. Take care of yourselves.